All right, looks like I'm live now. I'm going to tweet out the link for the stream, and then we can get started. Sorry again for the way. I just wanted to get people in here early so we could get a little bit ahead of it so everyone's in before we start. So sorry about the wait.
No, that makes sense.
All right, so I'm ready to get started if you guys are.
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Take a look. So obviously Chicago has the first pick in the draft. I think we all know who they're gonna pick at the one spot. But let me let Wally know that he can go ahead and take Bedard. And then at number 2, we have the Anaheim Ducks, which is Mitch, who's in the stream, so that'll be pretty quick once Wally makes his pick, which we're only going to give him a little bit because we all know it's going to be Bedard.
Yeah. I mean, the early one should go quickly.
Yeah. The first, I want to say, like 5 should go pretty fast.
Yeah, because I'm ready at 3. I mean, I've got 3 options for 3, and it'll be the third one if whoever the first 2 aren't picked. Columbus is taking a center.
I think I know who I'm going to pick with my Lightning pick in the second round, which, for viewers who don't know, the Lightning don't have an original second-round pick. I had to make some moves to get that, which we'll get into when that pick comes around. Which, we'll just say, I mean, he's going to pick Bedard, so we're not going to wait too long for that. So, Mitch, you're on the clock for Anaheim. Who's your pick?
Pretty easy. Adam Fantilli. No doubt in my mind.
All right, and do you want to describe Fantilli's game a little bit while we get ready for the next pick?
Fantilli is an amazing combination of power and finesse. He can beat defenders wide. He cuts inside. He can drive the net. He can set up scoring chances. He's a true dual threat scorer, the type of player who can open up the game. He can manipulate opponents. His playmaking has improved considerably over the past couple of years. Now he's faking out opponents, using the threat of his shot to set up passing, and his defense, physicality, all those things project to the NHL as being significantly above NHL average. He should become a top line power center, the type of player that you build a team around.
Yep. And so that takes us to the number 3 pick again. Not a surprise there. Fantilli going to Anaheim. I think that's a great pick for all the reasons you mentioned. So number 3, Columbus. That's you, Ben. You can go ahead and take your pick.
Yeah. Columbus is going to take Leo Carlsson. He looked very good against men at the World Championships. He's been impressive all season in Sweden. Another big center, the type that teams love to build around. He's got the two-way game. He can play on both ends of the ice. He can play with power. He can play with skill. He can do everything. In any other draft year, this is a guy that would be talked about at first overall. We just have an exceptional draft this year, especially in the top 5 or 6 picks. And so, Columbus is desperate to get that number 1 center. I like Kent Johnson, but I like Kent Johnson a lot better as a number 2 and Leo Carlsson as a future number 1. And I think that will set up the Blue Jackets down the middle. And they've made a number of moves to improve their blue line. So I think in the next few years, Columbus is really going to start pushing for a playoff spot and start contending.
Absolutely. And Carlson's a guy who I was just on a podcast recently. They asked me, is Carlson's hype legit? And I think getting picked at number 3 for Columbus, who has an exciting young core, he's going to prove that the hype is real for him this year. And so number 4 is actually Fred. Again, he's in the stream, so he'll be able to pick.
Yes, it should be. Can you guys hear me, first of all?
Yep.
Awesome. But yeah, I'm going with what I believe is the second most talented player in this draft, Michkov, which I don't think there is really a wrong answer within the first 4. Ben just mentioned in any other year, Michkov probably goes first. However, of course, there is geopolitical situations and incidents with the war in Ukraine, which is important to remember when taking into account. However, on raw skill, on his blinding offensive and even, I think, underrated defensive game, I think he's a player you cannot go wrong with. He is someone who you can put in as a potential franchise player for the future of the San Jose Sharks. They need that. They need someone to be that franchise player. And they can wait. They can wait the 4 years that he takes to in the KHL to develop to be maybe similar to what we saw with Kaprizov, Pereira, and those players who actually stuck in the KHL and really, really used that to solidify their talents and really solidify their, I want to say, maturity to really, really develop well and transition well to the NHL level.
Yeah, I agree. And as you mentioned, the whole situation out with Russia and Ukraine definitely throws a wrench in things for Michkov. But when you weigh the pros and cons of what Michkov brings to the table, it's tough to pass up on a guy like him. And if teams do pass up on him, which, I mean, you can't really say that Anaheim or Columbus passes up on them when they go Fantilli and Carlson. You can't blame them for that. But teams that pass after San Jose, like if San Jose passes, Montreal passes at 5 on Michkov, a few years down the line, they could be looking back and thinking, wow, we were stupid for letting him slip through the cracks. And to weigh the pros and cons, I think Michkov's a great get at number 4. You can't go wrong with him, especially because, like you mentioned, he's the second most talented player in the class, arguably. And number 5 is David Reinbacher to Montreal. That's the pick in the group chat from Chase. So I'm going to throw that in. Fred, I believe you were the one that wrote about Reinbacher for Last Word? Or was that me? I don't remember.
I think you had an article ahead of it, but yes, I think we both kind of watched a little bit of him when...
Yeah. Do you want to take the reins on that conversation while I update the sheet?
I think it's a sensible pick for in terms of like finding a defenseman for Montreal. They got Lane Hudson, which is a very, very important piece, I think, for the future of them. But else, they need someone. They need more on the back end in terms of, I believe, their prospect pool. So getting a defenseman makes sense. Then there's obviously the argument of who is the best defenseman of the class, whether it's Alexander Pelika or whether it's Reinbacher. And Reinbacher brings a lot of good things. Where I think his upside is bigger than Pelika, where maybe the floor of Pelika I think is better. So it's a bit of a, I think it's a bit of weigh-in situation for Montreal, but I think that's a fine pick for them. And in terms of getting what arguably is the best defenseman, that is absolutely a good pick.
Yeah, I think Reinbacher brings a lot to the table. It comes down to preference between Pelika and Reinbacher. Reinbacher is definitely more balanced of a defender in terms of play style. At 5, I think it's a bit rich, but then again, there's just so many good forwards that if you need a defenseman, you're going to have to take that swing. And, Pelika's my number 1 defenseman, but there's not a whole lot that separates him and Reinbacher, in my opinion. So, can't go wrong with either one of those top 2 defensemen in this class. And even though, Will Smith's still on the board, Zach Benson's still on the board, same with Ryan Leonard, there's options here for Arizona at the number 6 spot, which we are waiting on for Chase to make that pick.
Let's see. Thing I would ask before we go into that, I want to ask Ben about this, considering he is a Montreal Canadiens fan. I would like to hear your opinion about picking a defenseman at number 5.
So he's actually not Montreal. They got claimed before, yeah. They got claimed before he could sign up for him. So it ended up being Chase, who also is picking for Arizona, which takes us into that pick, which is Zach Benson. number 6 to Arizona, which I think is an outstanding pick. I love Zach Benson personally. I think at one point, and it wasn't for long, so this isn't sort of like this stretch idea that I had or try to be different. It was only for about a week, and I never released these rankings, but I had him as my number 2 over Fantilli and Carlson for, again, a short amount of time, but I did. That's how much I love his game. I think his playmaking ability, and even though he's undersized, his ability to play off the wall into the middle. I know Mitch, I believe it was you that wrote an article specifically on that, which was, by the way, a phenomenal piece. Anyone who hasn't read that should definitely check it out on Benson. I think he's one of the best playmakers in this class. Again, it's hard to compete when guys like Bedard, Fantilli, and Carlson and Mitchkov are in the class with you, but Benson's right up there with the best of them in terms of offensive abilities, and he's just really, really well balanced. So I think that's a phenomenal pick for Arizona. I think he fits in beautifully with that up-and-coming core as well. I don't know if you wanted to touch on Benson a little bit more, Mitch, since you wrote that piece. I'm pretty sure you wrote that piece on him. I could be wrong. Correct me if I am. But you can build off on that.
Yeah, we also published a video on our Elite Prospect YouTube channel where, by the numbers, he's the best playmaker that I've tracked. It's over 3,000 players since Connor McDavid. And of course, some of that is because he's insulated with 2 great shooters, but it's also a testament to his ability to, as you said, get the puck off the boards, play to the middle, play inside contact, and his seemingly limitless passing skill.
Yeah, and right after Benson gets taken off the board, Philadelphia at number 7 takes Ryan Leonard. That was James who took that pick. He takes Ryan Leonard. Anybody want to touch on that? It could be anybody. It could be Chad, Ben, anybody who wants to talk about Leonard.
I was going to say, didn't you wrote the piece for us? I believe about Leonard.
Yeah.
But we talked about how he's such a glue player in a lot of ways, which is possibly one of the biggest compliments I think about a player, is he just makes people better around him. And I think Philadelphia needs, they need a lot of things, Philadelphia, let's be honest. They have struggled over the past season to really solidify, I believe, a foundation of the prospect pool, and I think this is a great one to get in order to develop, first of all, Leonard, who is a brilliant player in his own right, really, really, really fun to watch, does a lot of things well. I think his shot is kind of there. I think his offensive prowess is there, but they need players who also make the rest of the guys better, and he is one of those, I believe.
Yeah, and so with that, it's the very next pick at 8, which is Washington, which is you, Fred, if you want to go ahead and make your selection.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go. I think for some this is taking a bit of a swing, but I'm gonna go Oliver Moore on this one. One of the best skaters in this class. Like, he is so explosive. Like, he has so much acceleration. Like, his speed is brilliant, and he's so smooth, so smooth in his there's that turn was being able to turn on a dime, but he's also able to change speed on a dime. Like, he can go from fast to slow to fast again within no time, and that really, really is something that is so hard to cover. His skating ability is among the best in the class. I think he has a really good work rate as well. I think he works really well along the boards to win the puck battles. He isn't shy from contact, and he has a really, really nice vision to his game. He passes the puck well to find his teammates when they're open and gets away from pressure due to his skating. And I think he has a good decision making. Like, his IQ is there as well. So I don't see many of downsides to this pick. So for me, Washington needs, again, as well, they need someone to step up after Ovi eventually leaves, and I think Oliver Moore could be a center similar to maybe what Backstrom was.
Yeah, and with that takes us to the number 9 pick for the Detroit Red Wings, which is currently occupied by Josh Erickson. I don't know if he's available, though. So we can have some discussion. I mean, now that some of the top names are taken off the board and it becomes more of a decision that Detroit will have to look over and have some discussions about. Who do you think is the right pick for Detroit here as we wait for the selection? In my opinion, I think Will Smith still sitting on the board is an interesting one. I'm not as high on him as most of you are here in this call and as well as the group chat. So I think there's something there. There's definitely upside with Will Smith, who could go with Detroit. Axel Sandin Pellikka is a defenseman. If Detroit wants to go that route, he's still on the board. And Dvorsky's still available, as well as Chris Stahl and Barlow and some other higher upside guys. Who do you guys think, if you were in charge of Detroit for this draft, based on what we still have available, who would you take at 9?
I think Will Smith's the pick here. I think Detroit needs center help. They have needed center help for a while. They need an eventual successor. I know they just signed him long term, but I think they need an eventual successor to Dylan Larkin. He's not exactly young anymore. He's not exactly old either, but you're going to need to shift him to number 2 at some point, potentially down the road. And when that happens in 2 or 3 years, that's hopefully lines up with Will Smith's timeline as taking over as the number 1 center. I think he's fallen a bit. I'm not sure exactly why, but he is there and on the board, and I can't see Detroit passing him up in this type of scenario. I don't think they're necessarily married to taking a center if Will Smith is off the board, like most project. But I think if he's there, they have to take him.
I agree. Would you guys agree as well, since Josh hasn't made a pick yet?
Absolutely, I would agree with that. I'm like you, Carl. I'm not overly high on Will Smith compared to what is a really, really strong top of this draft. That is also to say, like, I think last year he goes first. That's another thing to it. I think he goes probably first. Maybe I would have had Shane Wright over him. That's where my head is. But he goes top 2 last year, no doubt. So,
Mitch, would you agree that Will Smith's... Oh, sorry, Fred, if you had more to say.
It's that thing of like, yeah, so even if I'm a little bit lower on him, it's not to say that he isn't a really, really good pick.
Right, yeah. And Mitch, would you agree with the Detroit pick being Will Smith?
Yeah, Detroit would be crazy to pass on him if they get him at this spot for sure. Just so dynamic, so much upside. He's more of a big plays player than sort of a small plays detailed guy, but you can add all that later when you have that level of dynamic ability.
And that takes us to St. Louis, which nobody, it seems, signed up for St. Louis, so that'll be another discussion for us here. With Will Smith now off the board, who do you think St. Louis takes? Again, in my opinion, I think St. Louis could go just about anywhere. I think they go best player available. Looks like they're restarting and trying to rebuild a new core there in St. Louis. What with the failing to make the playoffs this year. So in my opinion, the best player still left on the board is Axel Sandin Pellikka. Do you guys think they go defense here? Do you guys think they go a different route and take a forward?
I think it's an interesting question because they have a very particular type of player that they value. And when you look at this draft, that player is more of the forward type. The Dvorsky, the Matthew Wood even, I'm forgetting Carl Colby Barlow. So I think the temptation might be there to just continue going down that route, adding forwards, and the Jimmy Snugger route, kind of grinder, high skill playmaker, can get puck off the boards, maybe not dynamic and open ice type guy. However, the temptation with Shemashev is there for sure. So I think most likely they probably go with Dvorsky. He's the perfect balance between upside and certainty. But I mean, this is a perfectly reasonable spot to just start. You can pick pretty much any player archetype, and in a draft so wide open, you might end up getting the best player.
Right. Fred, do you have anything to add to that? Dvorsky, Pellikka?
Yeah, but it's that thing of like, where, again, you said it yourself, like, Mitchell said it himself, that it's so interesting with St. Louis because I feel like they have a style that they draft after. They have a very specific style that they keep drafting after. Snugger is a great example of it. And it's that thing of like what fits better between, I believe, the two defensemen. I think Pellikka is the better one, but I almost think Dvorsky fits their style better. So it's between those. It's kind of I struggle a little bit to figure out which one they would take. But I think Pelika, for me, would be the one I would take if I was in their shoes, just to get something that maybe is a bit different on the back end.
Yeah, and right now it looks like Sam Tierpak, who's usually on, couldn't make it for the call today, said he would take ASP if he was the GM. And Chase said Dvorsky. So, Ben, it looks like you're going to be the final decision here, since it's been mostly tied.
Yeah, and it's definitely between those two players, and I just look at St. Louis's list. I'm looking at their prospect list, and outside of a very well, I like him. He's undersized, and we're not really sure what we're going to get in Scott Perunovich. I don't see a lot of defensemen amongst the Blues' top prospects. Perhaps a Buckinger of the Guelph Storm, but other than that, we're not really looking at a lot of defenders, and so I'm going to go with Sandin Pelika here. I think they just have more in their pipeline up front, and that's what is debating. Nothing wrong with Dvorsky. I think he will be a very good NHLer as well. I just think at this point it's so close. I'm all about best player available, but when it's very, very tight, then need becomes the tiebreaker.
All right, so Sandin Pelika goes to the St. Louis Blues, which brings us to the Vancouver Canucks at number 11 overall. Owning the Vancouver Canucks is Niels. Again, he's not on the call, unfortunately, but he should be able to make picks. We'll give him a little bit of time here, again, just like earlier with Josh. So just in case he isn't able to make the pick, let's go over some of the options. So Dvorsky, he was the guy that was debated for the last pick. Do they go with him here? Do the Canucks go with Dvorsky at the 11th spot?
I think if you're going best player available, like we said, there was clearly two choices for St. Louis, and so if you believe in best player available, then that's the pick for the Canucks. I do think too that they can use help up the middle after trading away Bo Horvat and I mean Vancouver's going into Vancouver's really weird actually. I was going to say they're going into a rebuild, but they're really weird because if you were going into a rebuild, the first thing you'd want to do is get a center, a number one defenseman, and a number one goalie. And if you look at the Canucks, they have relatively young pieces in Peterson, Hughes, and Demko in all three of those spots. And you'd think we should be able to build around this. But you also look at their cap-friendly page, and it's a disaster.
And not to mention the fact that Demko
hasn't
could be
gotten
traded
better
as well. What was that, Fred?
Yeah.
It hasn't gotten better in the last 2 days either with the whole Oliver Ekman Larson. So it's
It's gotten better in the short term. It's gotten a mess in the long term. I don't know. It's a debatable move. But I do think that there's always pressure in Vancouver ownership to win now, and that's quite frankly has been their problem over the last 10 years. Is that after that 2011 team kind of fell off and started to fall apart, they didn't go through they went through patch jobs because that's what their ownership wanted and didn't want to be out of the playoffs. They continue to miss the playoffs despite these patch jobs. But if you're gonna continue down the patch job route, then I think you do go forward because typically they're ready and making an impact at the NHL level a lot quicker. So I think that's another reason why I think they would lean Dvorsky, and especially his game's pretty mature. I could see him in the NHL, a year from now, type thing.
And so Dvorsky, are we in agreement that Dvorsky goes here at number 11?
Yeah. Dvorsky.
But Vancouver really is hard because it's like they saw the team they lost to in the 11 finals and tried to emulate it and has never really stopped trying to emulate that team. And it's weird.
Sometimes I don't know with Vancouver, but I really do think it's an ownership issue that won't let them tear it down and rebuild the way they really should.
It feels like an owner that tries to get too involved with things almost.
Yes. That's and Ben, I know you mentioned they have the three main pieces, or what you'd expect to be the three main pieces of a really strong core in Pettersson, Hughes, and Demko, but they're shopping Demko. And so, I mean, you don't really know where Vancouver is going. I mean, the whole OEL trade was a complete disaster. They're going to be moving Garland. I mean, it's tough trying to figure out what direction they're heading in. So drafting for them is really difficult, but again, Dvorsky being available at that spot. Again, I'm not super high on Dvorsky. I know we had this debate when we were putting together our last word draft rankings, which we're still working on, of course. But we had a little bit of a debate of where he should go, and it was mainly because of me being lower on him. But he's got a pro style. He definitely, I mean, looks like a guy that'll be in the NHL one day. Whether he sticks or lasts and what role he has is debatable, but he should make it to the NHL one day. So I think that's a very good pick for Vancouver there, just with the floor that he has.
Yeah, his floor is really good. Like he plays such a sensible game, like very mature. Again, and that's one of the things I think you can often feel about. I feel at least about Swedish hockey players from the SHL and Allsvenskan is that they play such a mature game. They play two-way game. They play with. If you don't work there, if you don't have the ability to work in both zones, you're not going to get a chance on the pro league teams. You might do fine in the juniors, but if you don't give it 100% each and every shift, you're never going to be playing. So I think that's often an indicator of that whole what level are players playing at versus each other. And I think that's where Swedish hockey especially excels.
And so Arizona's back on the board at 12. Given Chase quite a bit of time, so hopefully he'll be able to make a pick while we discuss for number 12. So with their first pick, they went with Zach Benson, which I think is an excellent selection. In speaking to Coyotes fans and friends who are Coyotes fans, they spoke about how they want to go forward D or D forward with their first two picks, meaning they are able to get a defenseman at the 6th spot, they're going to go ahead and take a forward at 12. If they go with a forward at 6, they're going to try to get a defenseman at 12. Do you guys agree with that sort of direction? And if you guys do you think they go Simashev, Gulyayev? There's a few defenseman options. Who do you think they go with at the 12 spot? If do you think they should go D here?
I think going defense is the right idea here, especially if you have Simashev available. You're Arizona. You can afford to run this timeline out a little bit longer. He's a high upside player. And as we look at Arizona's draft record, they're a team that seems particularly confident in their ability to develop players. And so if they think they're that good at it, Simashev is the perfect fit, is he not?
Oh, for sure.
I would agree. Fred?
I fully agree. It is that thing, you said it. They have, as much as a mess as they are in a rebuilding phase. They know where they are. They have time to let this guy develop the skills he needs to develop, and they seem very, very. They have often, I feel like, over the past 2 or 3 years, drafted players that needs time and development, and it's very clear that they do, and they've been very, very clear about that and trusting their own abilities to do so. So I think Simashev makes a lot of sense if they get Benson at 5. That would make a ton of sense.
And Ben, would you also agree with that?
Yeah, I think they are well stocked, especially when you add Benson to Logan Cooley and Dylan Gunther and Connor Geeky and all these players who they assembled at forward. They definitely need to put a little bit more on their defense. So I think Simashev makes a lot of sense that way. The only caution I have is Arizona the team who's going to get past the Russian issues? I know they did take a couple, or they did take Duda last year in the second round, so maybe they won't have that big an issue with it. But the question becomes, that's the only question I have, is are they comfortable using a 12th overall pick on given the situation over there? Some teams are, some teams aren't. I don't get a good sense with Arizona, although they did use a second rounder last year. Would they go this high at 12?
Right, so he sent a pick in, but it was a play that was already taken. He just noticed it, so we're going to give him a couple more seconds to look through the list one more time.
I will say, if he had gotten Will Smith at 12, that would have been a steal and a half.
Yeah, that would have been a great pick at 12 if he had fallen that far. And he will go Edward Chalet. So different from the discussion we were talking about here. Going Edward Chalet. I mean, I was high on Edward Chalet at the beginning of the year, and then he slowly started to slide down my draft board. Not too far. I still think he's a really good prospect. I'm fairly starting to have him in my top 20, which is really bad that I don't have that memorized. But yes, I do. So he's 16 for me. So Edward Chalet was taken by Arizona at 12. I think that might be maybe a little bit early for Chalet. But we won't get too deep into the discussion on that. Ben, you're up with Buffalo.
With Buffalo here. I think Buffalo's been, has well stocked themselves on defense between Samuelson, Power, Hokijarku, and of course Dahlin. So I think their top four on their blue line is pretty well set. They also scored a ton of goals this past year and did it with a lot of young players. So they really can go best player available. But I think for the reasons that they're not in a rush, I think they've got some job security in the GM's role right now, given how quickly they've improved. And given that he gives them a different dynamic than the defenseman who I mentioned earlier, I do think Simashev is a pick here for Buffalo if he does fall past Arizona. I think that makes a lot of sense for them in that they get that shutdown defender that really only Samuelson of their 4D really plays that style. So I think Simashev playing that shutdown type of defense would be a good pick for Buffalo, who certainly has a lot of offensive weapons already in their system.
That defense suddenly becomes very, very interesting in the future. Power, Rasmus Dahlin, Dmitry Simashev, and Mattias Samuelsson. That is a scary top four.
So actually, I misread it. Ben is Boston, not Buffalo. So I read his name for Buffalo instead of Boston. It's actually Sam who's picking, but he's in the chat right now, so that should be pretty quick. I apologize, Ben, but if he does go Simashev, that would be... We'll see if that's where he goes. I mean, Sam...
Yeah, no, I didn't think I was Buffalo, but I just kind of...
went with it. I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I just one spot off. I didn't. I read it too quickly, so I apologize for that. But like I said, he's in the chat right now, so it shouldn't be too long.
I love your thinking, though, Ben. I love your thinking with that.
Yeah, I kind of thought it out loud at the same time, thinking through their defense and forwards as I was going, as I wasn't. I had phoned up obviously on Columbus and Boston.
And then after Buffalo's pick, it will be Pittsburgh, which I already notified James, who's running Pittsburgh. He also picked for Philadelphia. So it looks like Sam's actually typing it in the... there you go, he took Simashev. I believe that was him that wrote that. I don't think any of you guys are tampering with the spreadsheet. So it looks like he goes Simashev there.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the thinking there makes sense. They're well set on defense with Power and Dahlin in terms of offense, and I think he just brings them a nice compliment to those two.
Yeah, so he did go Simashev. He typed it out in this spreadsheet before he wrote it out in the group chat, but that's his pick. It's Simashev. Which, again, for the same reasons Ben had mentioned, is a very intriguing pick for Buffalo. Seems like the popular one based on your guys' reaction, which takes us to the next pick, which is Pittsburgh, which would be James. Who do you guys think Pittsburgh takes while we wait for his input on his selection?
it's Pittsburgh is kind of another one of those teams that's interesting to me because we've talked about, I think, when is that window shutting? When is that glorious dynasty going to end with Malkin, Crosby, Letang, all of those? When do they need to rebuild? And the question is it starting to come now? And it's like it's similar to like a little bit Vancouver, where I'm like, where do they need players? Because in my opinion, the best player available is Andrew Crystal, which for me, if you want like top end skill, that might be a little bit of a risk. He's probably the guy I will go for.
Yeah, and I think another name in there is Colby Barlow. He has quite a few top 10 rankings publicly that I've listed out. And he also has a pick or a ranking where he's 30th. So he has a wide range of possibilities in terms of where he can land. But looking at what Craig Button said, which again, Craig Button is well connected with teams. He has Barlow as his 10th rated prospect. So I think maybe even Barlow would be a nice pick there alongside of Crystal. So just looking at it from that perspective, I think it could be either one of those two guys if I was running Pittsburgh, because I think Barlow's a little bit closer to the NHL level, and by a little compared to Crystal, I mean quite a bit. Crystal is one of those guys where there's some injury concerns. He was injured for a bit of the year earlier this season. Size concerns is another thing that's been mentioned, which I think is overblown. I think there's so many successful stories for shorter players and lighter players in the NHL. Braden Point, Cole Caulfield, just to name a couple. So I think, looking at size is a bit overblown, especially with Zach Benson. When you actually watch his game, he plays bigger than he actually is, and that's another thing that Mitch touched on in that great article. Again, I can't stress this enough. That was a phenomenal article, and if you really want to hype yourself up about Benson, read that. It was fantastic. But I think there's so many success stories with smaller players that it's hard to look at Crystal and doubt him. But at the same time, with the injury that he had this year, is that cause for concern for NHL teams picking within the top 15? Let's see. He is going to pick Nate Danielson at the 14th spot, which I think is interesting. I think it might be a little high for Danielson, but he's also a very intriguing player. Mitch, if you want to talk about Danielson while we move forward.
Danielson is all outside speed. Get the puck, beat defenders wide with crossovers, attack the net. You see a lot of playmaking from him, but he usually has to beat someone wide with his feet first, which he's not really the type of player who's going to cut in early or delay, find the trailer, and so on. So he's not a high-level offensive creator. When you add that speed with an improved physical game and a sturdier defensive game that he added throughout the season, of course, he was a top player growing up as well, so there is more runway than you would normally get from a late birthday who is a little bit more physically mature. So it's a perfectly reasonable pick. You expect him to play in the NHL within 2 years, which is definitely what Pittsburgh is aiming for after Kyle Dubas's most recent comments. So it's about as NHL ready or as close to NHL ready as you're going to get in this spot.
Yeah, and just to go off what James is saying, who made the pick, he said after picking defenseman Owen Pickering in the first round last season, felt that Danielson may make sense to replenish center depth in the pool. And he's also factored in that he feels like Danielson would be a Kyle Dubas pick as well, and given that all that's gone on in Pittsburgh this offseason. So I think that those two things make sense and help explain that pick a little bit. Pittsburgh's really, like we say, they're a team that's, if they're not rebuilding yet, are going to need to rebuild soon. And so that's a move that needs to be made at a certain point.
All right, and with the Nashville Predators selection at number 15, Chad, who's in the chat, looks like he's unable to talk at this time.
I'm here.
Oh,
I'm here.
All right.
Sorry.
You want to announce your pick to the group?
I've been listening in the background. A lot of good stuff from you guys. You guys make me feel like I don't know anything right now. But I'm just loving listening to this. This is awesome. But Yeah, so I might be going with a little bit of stretch for some of you guys, but I'm going to go with the player that I've just really enjoyed watching all of his highlights, and I love his offensive IQ. And where the Preds are at right now with a 15th pick and the 24th pick, 13 draft picks, no one knows if they're rebuilding, if they're trying to stay competitive. Barry Trotz is the new general manager. They got a new head coach. It's just, I mean, even the people who follow the team the closest don't know what direction this team's going to go in. So I feel like you got to make a really, really not just safe pick, but just a smart pick with a player that's got a high floor, maybe not the highest ceiling, but you can't afford to mess this pick up here. So I'm going to go with Gabe Perreault at number 15 because I like his overall offensive abilities, something the Predators badly need. They have not ever had any success with drafting a dynamic top 6 offensive player. All of their great draft picks over the years have been goalie or defenseman for the most part. So they really got to nail this pick, and I'm really excited. Gabe Perreault can help on the power play. Me and Kyle he came on Catfish on Ice, our Preds podcast, and was awesome. And said he's not as high on Gabe Perreault as me, and I took all that very closely. I think he knows my love for Zach Benson and how I knew it was never going to happen, that he was going to fall to the Preds. But I don't know. I like Gabe Perreault. I like Colby Barlow. I like some of these other guys, Crystal and all that. But I feel safer with Gabe Perreault, and so that's why I'm going with that pick. And then we pick again at number 24. So I'm not too worried about having to wait too long to make my next pick. So I'm going number 15 with Gabe Perreault, and then I've already got my sights set on number 24. So.
Yeah, no, it's a great pick. I am lower on Perreault than the consensus, certainly. He is one of the smartest players in the class in terms of his ability to read the play and find openings in the offensive zone. But it's certainly a big swing. I think top 15 is a good spot for him for his upside and his offensive abilities for sure. But I certainly have my concerns about his translatability and his coachability at the NHL level. Not to say that he's not a coachable player per se, but more from a sense of he's not the best defensively. He's not the most engaged defensively. How will NHL coaches take to that? Will they put him in the right role to succeed if he's not providing a lot of value defensively? So I'm more concerned about the development at the NHL level more than his actual skill at this time. That's what I'm more concerned about.
Well, and here's kind of, I think, well, let me say real quick, to kind of like respond to that. I feel that the Predators are not in a super rush right now to rush this pick into the draft or into the next season because they've already got a lot of young prospects that played heavy minutes down the stretch. If you remember and who knows if they trade some of these guys away. Barry Trotz has already hinted that he wants to make some trades. So that's another wild card in this whole discussion about where the Preds are going in this draft. I think they can completely shake this draft up, first of all. But if they stay at 15, I don't think they have to make a home run swing with this pick as far as they've got to be in the league like quickly. I think they can play a very safe approach. They've got a great prospect system, or with their AHL team, the Milwaukee Admirals, who went to the Western Conference Finals of the Calder Cup playoffs. They've been really doing a great job at developing talent lately. So I'm not so worried. I do know that he has a lot of development to do, like Kyle said, though. But go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, like, one of the things that I noticed, and I think I talked with Kyle about this while I was watching him a little bit, some footage of him, is one of the best abilities of him is he is where the puck goes. Not where the puck was, where the puck goes. He's always getting the lucky bounces, and to the point where it's no longer luck. It's because he's a really, really smart player who doesn't need to be chasing. He finds the open ice, gets there, and scores. Like, there's so much of that to it where I'm like, it shouldn't work necessarily by pure pure sense, but because you're so smart and because you place yourself so well, it works. So I think in terms of the Predators taking him, I actually think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that would be for a Minnesota Wild fan, slightly scary pick.
I think too, like, Nashville has had a lot of success with slower-ish skaters and helping them get to the NHL. Tolvanen, Luke Evangelista, these are all guys who have had skating issues coming up, and then by the time they get to the NHL, they're functional enough. And Perreault, of course, as you mentioned, Fred, the ability to just know where the play is going to go, the anticipation, the ability to get open. And then you add in the fact that he's one of the draft's top playmakers, how he always draws pressure before passing, creating more space for the next touch. So, yeah, he's a really good fit for Nashville, and they've had success with players like him. So, yeah, it's a great fit right there.
Yeah, and here's a couple other things quick, and then we'll move on. The things that I really like about Perreault that made me decide to make this pick here is I love his foundation. I love that he's already got things to his game that if you're worrying about developing him, you don't have to worry about those things. And it's the things you all just mentioned. The things that he has to work on and improve on, I think that as long as he gets proper coaching and development from all that, then I think he can definitely take his game to the next level. And it's going to take some time. And that's why I'm not so worried about seeing him in the next 1 to 2 years on the NHL making an instant impact. I think we can be patient in that. I think that I'm very realistic, and most of us are, that the Predators aren't going to be competing for a Stanley Cup anytime soon. Probably not, at least for another 3 to 4 years, to see what this young talent, how they keep improving. But yeah, so that's kind of why I went with that pick. I went with a little bit safer pick than maybe taking a Colby Barlow or one of the other ones that were on the board. It was tough though. I really, really had to think about it there. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. So to move forward here, there was the first big trade of the mock draft, and it happened between Montreal and Calgary. So the original pick was Calgary, but the two GMs, which is Chase and Sam Tierpak, they decided to make a deal. That deal was Josh Anderson, the 37th overall pick in the 2023 draft, to Calgary in exchange for Dylan Dubé and the 16th overall pick in this draft class, which is why Montreal moves up here. Chase is working, I believe, so he might be a little bit behind here. Looks like he just opened it, so he should be making his pick shortly. But with that, Ben, you're a Montreal fan. If this trade happens in real life, how are you feeling about Montreal moving up to 16? Oh, Ben, you're muted.
Unmute.
You muted yourself again.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay. I do think that this would be a good move for Montreal. I apologize for muting, but I do think this would be a good move. Earlier in this draft, they took Reinbacher, and we talked about their defense. Their defense is absolutely loaded on the left side. So Reinbacher makes a lot of sense because they're not as deep on the right side. On the right side, in terms of young defensemen, you're looking at Barron, who was in the NHL this past year. You're looking at Mailloux, who I have a lot of questions about his defensive game, although his offensive game certainly appears to be on track. I don't know about his play without the puck. And that's basically it as far as right-handed defensemen go. So that Reinbacher pick does make a lot of sense there. Here, I think they need to go forward, though. And I think if you go defenseman at 5, then you need to go forward with the second pick. And I think you might be looking the other way. If you're Montreal. I mean, if you really wanted to double down on the defenseman, I'm a big fan. I know we rated him a little bit lower on the last word rankings, but I was pounding the table for him a little bit earlier, and that's Willander. If you wanted to go with it, double down on going for those right shot defensemen, you could go that way. If not, I think from a Montreal perspective, I think here you're looking at guys like Colby Barlow, Cristal, and that group there. You see, I just don't want to say somebody who's already been drafted. Yeah, Oliver Moore's already been drafted. So, but I do think you're looking at and Matthew Wood would be your third option there. If they want to continue. They did go heavy on size last year with the Slafkovsky pick. I don't know that means they're married to size because they also took Philip Miechar and Lane Hudson later in the draft. But that's where you're loaded on left defense. I mean, right now you had Caden Gooley, Jordan Harris, and Arbor Jacki basically play the full season in the NHL. All three of them left-handed shots. You got Lane Hudson in the system. You've got moving further down a guy who was highly rated a few years ago, but hasn't seemed to break through in Norlander. And so you're absolutely like you're looking good on the left side, but you do need some help on the right. So that's kind of where I would be looking at potentially going Willander here. But I think given that you've already taken Reinbacher, it might make sense to go out forward.
All right, so it looks like Chase is unable to make the pick. He's opened it, but he hasn't updated with anything. So, Ben, since, again, you're a Montreal fan, you were initially going to sign up for Montreal. Do you want to go ahead and do the honors?
I think with Reinbacher already in the system, I think you go Colby Barlow here.
All right.
Don't think I can fault that pick at all.
Yeah, and I think you're looking at, down the road, you're looking at finding a winger to play with Suzuki and Caulfield, and I think that might be where you go. And then you've got a second line that starts with Slafkovsky and Kirby Dach, and it would really be heavy and be able to play a very puck possession game on that second line if you've got. Or you go Barlow on that second line if Slafkovsky is going to end up with Caulfield and Dach, or Caulfield and Suzuki.
Yep. So that takes us to pick 17, which was, again, Josh Erickson. He's unable to make picks, it seems. So we'll have another quick discussion. Does Detroit... let's go back here and see. So Detroit at number 9 took Will Smith. Do they take another swing here and go with a guy like Crystal? Or do you think they go for more of a safer pick like Matt Wood? What do you guys think?
What is the situation defensively for these guys? What is the defense looking like for Detroit in terms of prospects? Because they got more Seider, of course.
What was that?
And then you got Edvinsson, Guillaume, Wallinder. It's pretty good across the board.
It's pretty
good.
So.
Tall, mobile defenseman for sure.
So they wouldn't necessarily go for defenseman here.
I think not at all. I'm kind of thinking, I wonder if they're the team that might go high on Lukas Dragicevic, fitting the tall offensive defenseman, not necessarily the smoothest skater, but he's the hub through which Tri-City's offense flow, just a pretty dynamic player. Detroit hasn't shied away from those, and then their forwards tend to be more hard skill guys. So I wonder if maybe Hanzek is where they go. Maybe they take a big swing on Quentin Musty, or maybe they just go with something a little bit safer like Ethan Gauthier.
Let's see that. Yeah, that was my thinking as well, because I'm like, with what they got in the first pick, I was like, do they go defense here to kind of bolster that? And I was thinking Dragovic as well. That's kind of that mold of, I almost want to say Nick Lidstrup type of defenseman that they always kind of seem to want.
So just for what it's worth, Sam in the group chat said Quentin Musty. It would be his choice. So I know, Mitch, you mentioned Quentin Musty. I know that probably wouldn't be your first choice. You kind of went through a couple names, but do you think Musty would be a good spot, or Detroit would be a good spot for Musty at 17?
Personally, I think Musty's the best player available. I don't know if that's the type of player Detroit has historically valued. I think, again, probably more tall defensemen, or if they're going to go upfront size, it might be Wood or Gauthier. So I think this could be a natural place for Matthew Wood too. Like, big, talented. It just comes down to the skating, and so like he's a high upside pick. He's probably going to go. If he could go 10 spots higher than where he's going in this mock draft. So I think this might be Matthew Wood's time, and it's a good place for him too.
I think our highest rated player on the last word list right now is Crystal, but I don't feel like he's a Detroit pick.
No.
I don't get the Yzerman pick from him, and so I'm fine with with letting him fall another spot here. But that would be our highest rated player. I think Wood would be our next highest rated. So that kind of, and he does seem to fit a little bit more of what Yzerman has gone for traditionally in drafts.
Yeah, I mean, Detroit's big on Swedish players. Do they go with Tom Willander, a Swedish defenseman?
Yeah, that's
there?
another good option.
Also,
Detroit, I mean, he's a different type of defender than Seider and Edvinsson, who are their two big prospects on the blue line right now. So it could make some sense there as well. I mean, he's a little bit smaller than those two players, and maybe a little bit more dynamic offensively than they are. So that could make some sense in that he's a contrast to what they've already built on their blue line.
So what do you guys think? With it kind of seems like we've narrowed it down to Willander, Wood, and Musty. Seems like we're leaning more towards Wood. So would you guys be more inclined to say Wood goes to Detroit here just to speed things up a little bit?
Yeah.
I think I would, yeah.
All right, Matt Wood it is to the Detroit Red Wings, which brings us to the next pick in the draft, which is Winnipeg, which does not have a GM. So another discussion for us. Let me just update the group. But again, I mean, does Crystal go to Winnipeg? He seems like more of a fit for Winnipeg than he was for Detroit, in my opinion.
I was going to say he reminds me a lot of Nick Ehlers. Has a lot of Nick Ehlers to his game of like just so much, I want to say just speed and just offensive firepower to his game. Like there is so much flair that I like about it, and I see a lot of that. Although I think there is probably a little bit of where I think Ehlers has greater top end speed and a bit more, I think, skill when hitting top end speed than Crystal. That's something he needs to improve on, in my opinion. I think his style is there. I think he creates, but his flow is slow. His flow is there. There is a chance it does not work, and I don't know. Winnipeg needs players that works. That's the thing.
Well, I think we need to talk about Winnipeg for a second before we even get into the pick, and that is, this is a team that really feels like they're at the end of an era to me. I think you're going to see Dubois gone. I think you're going to see Blake Wheeler gone. I think you're going to see Connor Hellebuck gone as well. And I think that there was a fourth one. And Mark Scheifele is the fourth one. Sorry. So they're all UFAs coming up in 2024. Winnipeg's a team that has not had a lot of historical success in bringing UFAs to town. Being that far north, there's not a lot around Winnipeg outside of Winnipeg, and you're talking a city of 800,000 people. It is not the most attractive UFA destination, and the taxes aren't good either. So it really feels like they're going to have to, if all those players are indicating, Dubois indicated he's not resigning, Hellebuck says he's not resigning, they're going to need to trade these guys and really bulk up on picks. So I think that they're in best player available type mode here. You're going to have Ehlers, Connor, and Josh Morrissey, and not a heck of a lot else.
So to go back to the group chat, Sam's pointing out he thinks it's got to be Musty here, or
Musty I could see actually as well.
or a college player, which the highest rated college player still available at this point is Gavin Brindley, which is kind of a sleeper pick there. He's one of my favorites. Hoped his name would be a little bit, under the radar a little bit longer. He's one of the names I'm looking at for my pick in the second round for Tampa, which I don't think he'll make it. But hey, one can dream. But that's what Sam said. What do you guys think about Gavin Brindley's fit? I mean, I know we kind of narrowed it down to Chris Stahl and a little bit of Musty, but thoughts on Brindle real quick? Brindley, excuse me.
I think Brindley is interesting. Like almost more like what Ben was talking about, what the Jets actually need. I don't know if they need another type of player that Nick Ehlers is. I don't think Ehlers is on the way out. I think he's one of those. I think that's staying at least for now, and they can kind of build because of his tenacity. He's small, but he isn't scared. Like he kind of has a little bit of leadership to his game too, although he's not been favored by the coaching staff that's been It's pretty much all the time he's been in Winnipeg.
Mitch, do you agree? Possibly Brindley going here?
I don't know if Brindley necessarily fits the type of what they valued historically, but it is also Winnipeg. There's been some staff turnover in the last couple of years, and they're kind of one of these teams that swings back and forth between picking high upside guys and then taking more, let's say, boring picks. I think Musty might be the best of both worlds for them, and they haven't certainly shied away from picking more, let's say, limited skaters. Musty's certainly a better skater than McGroarty, but it's not an advantage that he's going to have at the next level. So I think McGroarty's probably the guy for them, unless there's a defenseman that I'm forgetting about.
Hanzik,
Because they're pretty bleak on defense.
Or sorry, not Hanzik. Sorry, Gulyayev, Willander, I believe, or did we take Willander already? I don't think so.
No, we haven't.
Willander's still on the board.
If he's available, they're taking him. If he's available, they're taking him.
That
I think
makes sense.
Willander for
Willander makes a lot of sense, actually.
If they can take a Swedish dude who can skate, is physical, likes to jump into the play, that's Winnipeg through and through.
All right, so Willander to the Winnipeg Jets, which brings us to the next pick, which is Chicago, which is Wally's team. Let me update him again. He did say he was able to pick, so hopefully he'll be in pretty soon. But Winnipeg taking Willander is a great pick. So just in case Wally isn't able, let's talk about who Chicago should go for. Just again, in case of emergency, I think Musty. Musty or Crystal, they're the two highest rated based on consensus rankings in the sheet that we have here. He's my best player available on my list. And then also on Last Words list. I don't know how highly you value Crystal, Mitch, but on Elite Prospects, it looks like he is at 19 on their board. That seems to be the most recent ranking. I did it today, so hopefully that's the most recent.
Yep.
So, seems like a top 20 pick there. Do you think Chicago goes with one of those guys, or do you think they go more defensemen, again, like Gulyayev, or maybe some sleeper pick like Dragicevic?
One off-ice consideration. One off-ice consideration that I'd want to point out here is Connor Bedard's best friend is Andrew Kristoff. And they grew up together, and so I don't think that makes a lot of difference for a lot of teams, but I think for Chicago, your future is going to rely on the development of Connor Bedard. And if you want to make him happy from day one and really put him in an environment where he can hopefully succeed, that might make some sense as well.
And I also say the idea of Connor Bedard and Crystal playing together on the same line is terrifying, considering how smooth skaters they are. That is
I think Crystal is one of the draft's most interesting players, if not the most, because when you go down the list, it's very hard to find a team that seems to fit a Crystal. He's a player who has to have the puck a lot. He's very inefficient. He has games that are where he's only making low-paced junior plays over and over and over again. And he could very easily slip outside of the first entirely. I personally like him more than where we have him ranked at 19th. I think he's a better version of some of the players we have ranked over him. But the risk with him is real. And we're currently experiencing the same conundrum that a lot of NHL teams are having, where it's like, okay, now has to be Crystal's time. And then we talk about it, and it's like, okay, maybe there's actually someone else who's better for this team.
Exactly, and that's the thing. I think I wrote that on my piece. He can be a 100-point scorer in the NHL. He has all the skills to be that. But there is question marks towards it where he could also completely fail and never quite make it to more than maybe 20 goals. Or 20 points in a season. And it's really weird to talk about a player like that.
Yeah, and I think the thing that Ben brought up about him and Crystal playing roller together in the spring, that's a real factor that Chicago should be considering here, especially because this is a team that their prospect pool has a bit of everything in it, and if you can add a player who might improve the short-term happiness of your star player, and who knows, maybe it works out long-term too, and you get a second star in Crystal. So I like it. It's just, again, one of these things where we could keep doing this until like pick 32, pick 33 with Kristoff for sure.
Yep, so to end that discussion, Wally sent his pick in, and it's Quentin Musty going 19th, which I think is a really good pick. Finally, he's been in discussions for the last 5 or so picks. Finally goes to Chicago, finds a home there. I think that's a great pick. As for Seattle at 20, I've taken over for Seattle, so it's my pick, and I'm going to go with Andrew Kristoff. The reasoning behind it is I think he has, of all the players available, in my personal opinion, the highest upside. And Seattle's in a situation where they just went deep on a deep playoff run. They have a plethora of picks. They're one of the teams that may even trade up because of how many picks they have. They have the ability to do that, or maybe trade picks for players to add to their roster. So they're in a really, really good position based on the performance they had this season and how many picks they have in this draft. I think they've done an excellent job with asset management in that way. I think they take a big swing because Andrew Kristoff, again, he may not have the best floor. He's a risky pick, again, for the same things I mentioned before and the same things you guys have mentioned. I think he is a Seattle fit at 20 just based on all the stuff that's... I mean, look at Seattle, the team that they have. They have time to wait for Kristoff to develop. They don't need him at the NHL level right away. They have a good team as it is. And I think he has, again, the highest upside out of the guys still remaining. So I think Andrew Kristoff is a great pick. Which brings us to pick number 21. Unless one of you guys wants to touch on the Kristoff selection.
I think we touched on him pretty much throughout the last 10 picks.
Yeah.
So.
Which takes us to pick number 21, which is Minnesota, which is you, Fred. So go ahead. Who's your pick for number 21?
What annoys me is I was actually going to pick Kristoff here because I was like, oh, get a player like that has so much upside to a team that already has so much depth in their prospect pool would be maybe the perfect fit we were talking about. But I think another player that I would probably, as a Minnesota Wild fan, look towards is the Wild doesn't really need too much, maybe outside of center depth, which we have been talking about for like the past 10 years. So for me, the best available center is Brandon Yeager, and I think he is a player that I would take here as a potential like second line center for someone like Matthew Boldy, where I believe he can potentially have those 20-25 goal seasons where he puts up 60 points. And if you can get that at 20 seconds with the Minnesota Wild players coming up, I think that's very valuable. He is such a good offensive player, in my smart with the puck. When he has the puck, something happens. He creates with smart decisions, not necessarily trying to force the golden pass, but makes just a smart decision. Either through throwing it to the blue line and keep control of the puck so that a new chance can be created. So for me, he would be the perfect fit as a potential player, similar to what like Eric Staal was when he was having that 40 goals season he had in Minnesota a couple of years back. And putting him with one of Yurov or Ogren, and for that matter Matthew Boldy, could be a very interesting line in the future on the second.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super high on Yeager. I have my concerns about his translatability. But looking at his positives, I mean, his shot is amongst the best in the class. He has an outstanding shot. So if you give him space, you can make it count each and every time. It's just the off-puck ability is what I'm concerned about. And transitionally, he doesn't really jump off the page either. But other than that, I mean, Yeager's a really good player. I think he's very raw. His talent's very raw to this point. But for Minnesota, again, for the same reason that Seattle took Kristoff, or my reasoning behind why Seattle takes Kristoff at 20, is the upside. Minnesota doesn't need to rush him. They're in no need of a guy like Yeager right away. They're a couple years out from needing his help at the NHL level. So they have time to let him develop, and I think that's a great spot for Yeager to land at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it is a thing of like Minnesota has so many depth players who can go in. They have so much depth in that prospect pool. Like they have Ogren, they have Yurov, they have Marat Kuznetsov, they have Rossi, who I'm still a believer in that he will develop at some point next season, that he will solidify his spot in the NHL. So having a guy who might be a bit of a risk, but if he works, he's going to be perfect in the center spot. I think it's worth taking for Minnesota. I think they have the ability to take the risk because of the prospect pool they've built over the past 3 seasons.
And that takes us to our next pick, which is the Philadelphia Flyers. Original pick was from LA. James took Callum Ritchie at the 22nd spot. He said, after drafting a winger in Ryan Leonard, I feel the Flyers will go center or defense with this pick, but personally I like Ritchie more than the defenders available currently, which is understandable. There's not a whole lot. Gulyaev's the next best defenseman that's still available, with Willander being taken off the board. Outside of that, you have Dragosivic, who's not everybody's cup of tea. Fisker Molgaard, who I know you're a massive fan, Fred, knowing he's coming. I know you love him, so and Caden Price. But other than that, I think based on the defenders available, wanting to go center, I think he made the right choice going center and taking Callum Ritchie there. What are your thoughts on Callum Ritchie, Mitch?
Callum Ritchie, one of the draft's best 200-foot players. He's also one of the draft's more skilled passers, just hitting on an Oshawa team that generates like -5 scoring chances per game, so he doesn't get many opportunities to use that offensive ability. With him, it largely comes down to skating and hoping that Oshawa improves, or you can free him from that situation as soon as possible. I think mid-6 center is likely where he lands. If the skating improves, he can get to the top end of that. If it doesn't, he's at the bottom end.
All right, thank you, Mitch. And you're back on the clock now, Mitch, with the Rangers. So who are you taking at 23?
Yeah, this is a pretty easy one. The Rangers like very aggressive, robust players, and if they're not super robust, they like size. So Sammy Honzek, pretty easy choice here. He's big. He fits what they try to build. He's good at getting defenders on his back. Learning how to better use those positions, like driving the net sooner, cutting through the hands, playing with more speed, is going to be important. But he has all the tools. He's fast. He can shoot it like an NHLer. He's got tons of passing skill. Just a matter of developing the reads. If they never come, he's Joel Armia. If they do, you're looking at a potential Thomas Hertl type player. So wide range of outcomes for him. But the Rangers certainly value their big guys.
Absolutely. And number 24, we have Nashville. Chad in the group in the call here. Who do you have at 24?
So I'm not in love with the defensemen that are left on the board at number 24, even though I would like the Preds to address defensemen, but I'm going to stay away from that. I'm going to take a kind of a risky swing here, but at least it's at number 24, not higher up. They need to restock center. They do. They've already called up a bunch of centers, so their prospect pool is now getting depleted at true centers. I don't feel super confident about this pick, but I'm going to go with it with where I'm at 24. I'm going to take Braden Yeager.
Oh, Yeager was just taken. Yeah.
I took him in Minnesota.
Yeager's taken?
Yeah, I took him in
Minnesota. Oh, my gosh. I missed it. All right, let me scramble. Man, I'm tough. All right, this is tough. I liked Honzek, too, but we already took a winger, so I didn't want to take 2 wingers within 9 picks. You guys might have to help me out a little bit here.
That's all right. So we have Gavin Brindley. For forwards, we have Gavin Brindley, Otto Stenberg, Riley.
Wait, Gavin Brindley's still around?
Yeah, he is. He's still there.
I'm taking Gavin Brindley then.
Damn it.
This actually worked out great. I got him mixed up. I thought Brindley was – this is why I'm not an NHL GM. I thought Brindley got taken and Yeager was still on the board. I got him mixed up there. All right, I'm very happy then. Yeah, I'm taking Brindley.
I'm pretty upset by that. I was hoping Brindley would keep falling.
Kyle, you only have yourself to blame, man. You came on my podcast and sang his praises, and
I know.
So
100%. I'll take the fall. I'll take the fall for that. But I was hoping he'd keep going under the radar there. If it wasn't you, it was going to be Sam. Sam's been talking him up in the chat too. So
I was going to take him as well with my next one. So I don't know if you would have had.
Actually, sorry to cut you off. Sam has a trade to announce in the group chat. I don't know if I should announce it now He hasn't sent it yet, but just a quick little little bit of excitement. There is a trade coming up from Sam. I don't know what team. He has multiple teams, so it could be any team at this point.
I've been spending a lot of the past week debating whether to trade like players and what to do with Minnesota, but I was like, I think if I'm the Minnesota Wild, I'm giving it one more year with some of the prospects, especially.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, I know, Chad, you wanted to add something else on the Brindley pick before I cut you off about the trade, so you can continue with that thought.
I just want to say that I think it's a very high probability that the Predators look to move the number 24 pick, especially if they really, really love their 15th pick, because they do have 13 picks in this draft. And I know they want to flip some of those assets that they acquired at the trade deadline for some players. And Barry Trotz has already pretty much said that he wants to get involved in the trade market this year because he doesn't really like the free agency market. So I'm not even entirely convinced that they pick at number 24, but if they do and they were to get Gavin Brindley there, I would be extremely happy with that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent value pick. What Brindley brings to the table, again, he's undersized. There's some concerns about his size based on the style that he plays. But like I said on your podcast, he is a buzzsaw. His feet are always moving. He's focusing on the little details, and he kind of gets thrown a little under the radar because he played with Fantilli, but in the games that I've watched and the games that I've tracked, Brindley was the guy that was leading the transition. He was the guy getting in on the forecheck and creating space, and he would play off of Fantilli. And one thing that I really, really stress is it takes elite-level players to play with elite-level players. So for Brindley to be able to bounce off of Fantilli and play alongside of him, and not just feed off of him, but also feed him some chances and create chances on his own, I think is a massive testament to how good he is. And it's unfortunate that the fact that he played with Fantilli, who's as good as he is, and there's nothing to take away from Fantilli, but the fact that Brindley's playing with a guy like him takes some value away from him and some attention away from him. And it's unfortunate, but some team's going to be really, really happy about the fact that he's flying under the radar for sure. Which takes us to pick number 25, which is St. Louis, who does not have a GM, not owned by anybody. So we can have a little bit of a free discussion here about St. Louis. Gulyayev is currently the top-rated player based on the consensus rankings. There's also Otto Stenberg, Riley Heidt, Daniil Boots, or I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Jaden Perron, and Grayson Sachin, some names that are still available at that spot for St. Louis. I believe they already picked. I could be wrong here. They did. They picked Axel Sandin Pellikka at 10. That was their last pick. So do you think they go with a forward this time around after taking a D? What do you guys think?
Daniil Boot, for sure. They like their size. He's incredibly talented. He's smart. It's just about how does this dude with that frame at that weight play in the NHL? So they're not shy, though, of picking their tall guys. I think he brings pretty much everything St. Louis is looking for, and unlike, say, some of their previous picks, he's a real high upside swing.
Would you agree with that, Ben? I saw you nodding your head.
Yeah, I think that Boot makes a lot of sense. I don't think it's a forward that they have to go forward here. I think they could go defenseman. When we looked at their prospect pool earlier, that was why we went Sandin Pellikka, and it was barren on defense. But the fact is, Boot just stands out on the board as best player available to me as well. I agree with Mitch there, and he does feel like an Armstrong pick. He does have that size on the wing that they've done in various times over the last 10 years. So I think it makes a lot of sense to go Boot as well.
Yeah, and Fred, would you agree with Daniil Boot?
Oh yeah, it's the St. Louis pick through and through. They want their size. They want that style of player completely that he is. So yeah, but that makes sense. That is such a sensible pick for St. Louis.
And that pushes us to pick number 26, which is the San Jose Sharks, which is you, Fred, if you want to go ahead and make that announcement.
I have to actually think this. This is with St. Louis. So I picked Michkov before. So I got a bit of a question to make here, which is, do I go basically well, ignore all the geopolitical stuff with Russia, which is a factor. You have to factor that in when you pick. And San Jose needs to have at least one of these hits. I think Michkov is the most sensible pick you can make in that position, viewed from a hockey basis. But it comes with risk. Defensively, I think they also need help, and probably the best defenseman, at least on my boards, is I hope I pronounce this right. Gulyabev? Yep. Gulyabev? Mikhail Gulyabev. I think he is probably the best defenseman on the board. However, again, comes with geopolitical risks. And for that reason, my other option is to go with Luka Dragovic. And I think I'm probably going to lean towards that pick more so. I think for San Jose, maybe having a more secure pick with a lot of upside makes sense. So I think I'm going to go Lucas Dragovic.
All right, so Lucas Dragos, I think I'm pronouncing it right. This is what I heard.
I think. Yeah, Dragosevic.
When I watched his games, I heard the commentators say Dragosevic. I don't know if that's 100% correct. Commentators aren't always right, but that's what I've heard. But regardless, Lucas Dragosevic is your pick with San Jose at 26. At number 27 is the Colorado Avalanche, who again don't have any owners or GMs there among the participants. So who do you think Colorado goes with? I mean, they have a really good team. They're a team that could wait. Do they go with Gulyayev as a high upside swing?
I want to go. If I want a high upside, I would go Otto Stenberg with Colorado.
My question is this the spot where our first goalie comes off the board?
That is also a question there.
And then that brings the discussion of which goalie, because Last Word has Bjarnason rated higher or highest among the group of goalies. Michael Rabel's a popular one amongst other outlets. I've also seen Trey Augustine's name up there. So I mean, there's a lot of discussion to be had about goalies. Do you think Colorado goes with a goalie though, Mitch?
I mean, I mean, we pay people to talk about goalies. I know nothing about goalies in any draft class. I can't. I'm not liable. So, I mean, I was thinking with Colorado, Melendek is probably. I mean, I tweeted about Melendek, and then all the people who retweeted it and shared it were Avalanche fans, being like, "This is the perfect player for us." And it's like, yeah, I can see it, but I also wonder if a forward is kind of more of an option. Stenberg is always an interesting one, especially because they picked the previous version of him before in Oscar Olausen. So, yeah, they're going to be an interesting team. I know nothing about goalies, so I can't add anything to that. But that was my answer.
The thing for me with Otto Stenberg is he's such a weird player because he is completely different depending on what league and what team you watch him play for. If he plays for Team Sweden, he is the best player on the ice. No doubt, he shines and he scores goals and he's an offensive dynamo. If he plays in the Junior League of Sweden, he still scores goals, but he looks like he doesn't really care. And then in the SHL, which is a lot more of a jump in terms of quality, so he won't score as much. However, he looks a lot more engaged. He's a lot more consistent in this play. So it's really weird. But I think in terms of his upside, if you want pure upside, he's the guy I would pick. But in terms of goaltending, that is about who has the most belief, because I think Trey Augustin and Bjarnason is depending on style a little bit.
I mean, I asked Sam, so we'll see. He said it wouldn't surprise him if the Colorado Avalanche go with a goalie. So, do we go with a goalie? I know Mitch said he's not too big with the goaltending aspect of the scouting world, which I don't blame him. I'm a goalie myself, and I couldn't evaluate a goalie well either, so I don't blame him at all.
I think I'm probably the one that's been doing it, or attempting to do it on the side, especially my abilities. And I think with Bjarnason, I think the one thing that I think he sometimes has is that I think he tends to almost go too far forward or too far back when he goes into his stance, which leaves him vulnerable for the top of the net. I think that is kind of a worry about me, that players are going to be able to pick that top corner if you give them the room for it. His stats are completely, like, if you look at simple stats like goals against and save percentage, he doesn't really look shine through. However, he also played for an awful team in a lot of ways. Yet he had a win percentage of 500, which I think is impressive. But if you go with win, Trey Augustin literally only lost 5 games all season. 2 of them, which was in overtime. He knows how to win.
Yeah, there is some theories out there that a junior goalie at 17 and 18 playing on a bad team is actually better for their development. Yeah. There are some who will say that. I mean, I say this all the time in the last word chat. Goalies are voodoo. Like, you never know what you're gonna get here. I think I would go with Bjarnason as the top goalie if we are gonna go that way. I think that he is the top goalie in this draft. But could a 6th round goalie come in and become an all-star and have a Hall of Fame career, and a guy in the 1st round, has a journeyman career and plays 15 NHL games? It's certainly possible. There's all kinds of Malcolm Subans and there's all kinds of Henrik Lundqvists out there, and it just. Goalies are, I think, the hardest position for scouts to be able to do at the NHL level, never mind us. So.
I think the one reason that I think I might go with Bjarnason in this one is I think the style I compared him to was Jesper Wallstedt, which I think, even though it's hard to judge goaltenders, I think all of us can kind of agree that he's probably one of the top goaltending prospects out there at the moment. And that's because of the calm and the presence he just oozes. Like, he makes no fuss. He's always there making robotic save after robotic save, basically demoralizing. Like, there's not a lot of flaws to the game, and I don't think there is with Bjarnason. Like, my thing about the top net is nitpicking to find flaws to his game, like major flaws to his game. And that's like things just to tweak. So I think in terms of ace, goalie, I think, has the better shot at making it, like the more consistent shot, I think, with Bjarnason. Maybe the better goaltender, if you go with ceiling, would be Augustin.
So, from what I've seen, both on the group chat from Sam and also from our discussion here, it's between Bjarnason and Otto Stenberg. Yeah. What would you go with, personally? Just quick, what would you go with, Fred, between Stenberg and Bjarnason for Colorado?
I actually think I would go Bjarnason, because I think Colorado has enough prospects in other positions.
How about you, Ben?
I think, I brought up the goalie as the position because I think that's where Colorado is going to go. And so I think Bjarnason would be my pick as the top goalie.
Mitch, are you good with that?
Sounds great.
All right, that takes us to Chicago, which is Wally in the group chat. I know I just updated him a couple minutes ago. He's already opened it, so he should be ready to go.
This is the trade.
What was that?
Oh, is this a trade? Yeah, this was the trade.
Oh, sorry. Yes, this is a trade. I apologize. So the reason Chicago's picking is because of the trade that I had mentioned earlier and then never brought up because it wasn't sent very quickly. The Toronto Maple Leafs, the original owners of the 28th overall pick, who is being managed by Sam Tierpach, traded that number 28 pick for numbers 35 and 55 from Chicago. So that's why Chicago's picking here now at 28. I forgot to update the 55 one. I need to do that.
I mean, that's a very Kyle Dubas move. I know Kyle Dubas isn't the GM of Toronto anymore, but that is a very Kyle Dubas move.
Yeah,
it's also a very same move, I wanted to say. It's also a very same move to do. Like, he wants as many picks as possible if the history has taught me anything by doing this with him.
I can say that Sam is not a fan of the Bjarnason pick at all. But, I mean, between Rabel, Bjarnason, and Augustine, it's really a flip of a coin. One, that's just how goalies are. It's impossible to truly judge a goalie at the age of 17, 18, 19 years old. and it's impossible to know what their projection is to the NHL level, so that's why there's a lot of differences. But those are the top three, and it all comes down to preference from there. So Bjarnason going there is not completely out of this world crazy. So, but yeah, Sam's not a big fan. He said it's got to be Rabel, if anyone, or Stenberg. So that was what he said in the group chat. Not a big fan, but it is what it is. And a big one here. This one's gonna break your heart, Fred. But it looks as though Chicago is taking Oscar Fisker Molgaard. I hope I pronounced that well.
Oscar Fisker Molgaard.
That was not right at all, but we'll continue here. So Molgaard off the board. I know, Fred, you're a big fan of his for obvious reasons, which you can tell us now, but...
obviously nationality is part of it. I come from Denmark. We don't necessarily, when you don't have hockey as a main sport, you kind of warm towards the players that play it, and especially those who gets to play it on a high level. And I think Oscar Fisker Molgaard is probably the best player Denmark has produced since Nikolaj Ehlers. He is not necessarily his shot. His shot is below average. However, pretty much everything is above, and he is potentially one of the smartest players of the draft. I think in terms of hockey sense, in terms of how he reads the game, in terms of his intelligence on the ice, I don't think you're going to find many that's better than him. He is so smart away from the puck. He's tenacious. He will track you down. He will work hard in both zones. Like, he won't be a point a game player. He won't be. However, if you want someone on the middle six who you know what you get from, you get 100% work from each and every shift, who will make the smart pass, who will make the smart move, who will take the puck from defense to offense, that is the guy you want. That is something, like, Kyle and I talked a lot throughout making the list for That's What on Sport, but also just the idea that we had on what do we value in a player. What is our value of a player? Is it skating? Is it shooting? Is it defensive, offensive abilities? We talked about one of the best skills is hockey sense. Knowing how to read the play and make the right move. And I don't think anyone does that better than Oscar Fisker Molgaard.
Which, again, he is a great player for all the reasons you mentioned. Again, I agree with you. Obviously, we went back and forth in conversations with Last Word about Molgaard. The two of us, I'm not sure we spoke about it in the group chat that we have, but I know the two of us talked about Molgaard quite a bit. Obviously, you're a big fan of him. We have him higher than most people do, from what I've seen at least. So yeah, definitely a great player there. The next pick is St. Louis again. I have a lot of first-round picks here, which I think they did a great job reeling in those first-round picks, considering the direction they're starting to go down now. But that means more discussion about who they pick. And I have three names, or three different options they could go down. One, for St. Louis, we mentioned size. I think Stenberg's an interesting one for St. Louis, still on the board. I think he's someone that they could go for. He feels like a fit for me. Another one is Ethan Gauthier. I'm not sure. I know there's different pronunciations of the last name, so correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's Gauthier?
Yeah.
Okay, Ethan Gauthier is another one. And I think they either go with Rabel or Augustine as well. I think one of those three, I think St. Louis maybe goes for a goalie there at the end of the first round, especially because Bjarnason's taken. Maybe that sets a domino effect off for those top three goalies. What do you think?
I think Joel Hofer is probably NHL ready at this stage, or at the very least, they're going to have to see what he is. So if there's a forward available that I think they would probably, if there's a forward available that they really like, they might save the goalie pick for later in the draft. There's also Cohen Zemer, who's kind of a hammer out there, and that's the type of player that they like. Skating issues aside, he's one of the draft's highest upside picks. I wonder if they're the team that goes high on Danny Nelson, who is getting a lot of first-round interest these days. But for the sake of these discussions, I wonder if maybe this is Stenberg's time. He's available, he's got tools, high character, according to everyone who knows him. So he fits somewhat what St. Louis does, and he provides a little bit more upside than we're used to seeing them pick.
And Fred?
Yeah, I just looked at the chat, like as Sam said, I think Ethan Gauthier is a very St. Louis pick as well.
Yeah.
Like fits the mold completely. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's where they go and then leave Stenberg on the board just because of the risk with him.
And what do you think, Ben? So it looks like we've narrowed it down to Gauthier and Stenberg. Who would you take if you were St. Louis?
I think Gautier's a St. Louis style pick. We talked about Armstrong's the type of picks that he makes previously, so I think I would lean that way with St. Louis.
All right, so it looks like Ethan Gauthier is going to St. Louis at that spot, and the next pick is also going to be a discussion for us is Carolina. Now, Sam, again, in the group chat said, I think Blues go Ethan Gauthier, Carolina goes Otto Stenberg. So is Carolina's spot Stenberg? Or you know how Carolina is. They're not afraid of public consensus. They're not afraid to take big swings on players that have some risk to them. Do they go with Mikhail Gulyayev, who's still on the board?
Carolina last year took more Russians than any other team in last year's draft. They are clearly not afraid of the political situation over there. They did it over and over again, grabbing these fallen Russian players. So I think if Gulyayev is falling here, which he has a little bit, I think they're the ones who jump.
And would you agree with that, Fred?
I would. I think it makes sense. I think both Stenberg and Gulyayev makes a lot of sense. Stenberg for the fact of like we talk about how they tend to pick Russians. They also tend to pick like the Finnish option that drops a lot, or the Finnish player with like a ton of upside. So I could see both pick be a very, very Carolina pick, but I think if Gulyev's there, they're gonna pick him just because they are not scared of that situation.
You would agree with
and they know how to
Gulyayev there, Mitch?
Yep, for sure.
All right, so Gulyayev to Carolina, which means that Chase is on the board for Montreal. And I know Ben just left. He had to go. He's frozen on the screen right now, but he isn't here. So Montreal back on the board with some names still available. Stenberg still available. Riley Height still available. Excuse me. Jaden Perron, Grayson Sachin. I know you mentioned Danny Nelson as another name on the board that's been getting a lot of praise, especially towards the second half of the year. More recent times, getting some praise for potential first-round pick. So still a few names left on the board for Montreal at this point. So yeah, he opened the last one when I told him he was the next pick, their upcoming pick. So he's probably looking at his options now. So hopefully it won't be too long. But just in case, again, who would you guys pick if you were Montreal? I mean, they have goalies, right? They're not going to look at a goalie here at this spot. It's too soon for them, I believe. Do they go forward? Do they go defense? Again, I mean, I'll pull up their recent pick or their last pick here, which was at number 5. They took David Reinbacher. So do they go with a forward here? And who would that forward be if they do?
I think that forward is Bradley Nadeau. Might have the second best shot in the draft. It's an absolute cannon. Can change the angle on it instantly. He's a bit of a swing because of BCHL. We don't really know exactly where his skill level lands, particularly his skating, his playmaking. Maybe he goes to the NCAA and he's pushed more. You see a higher pace, more pass-focused game as a consequence. So he's a huge upside swing. It's a bet on tools. Montreal has not shied away from that in the Kent Hughes era. So I think Nadeau is a real option for them here.
I like that a lot, actually, because of just that. Like, I think because he went to, some people criticize the move that him going to Maine was not a high-end university, but he's going to get playing time. He's going to get top minutes, more than likely, at that point. He's going to learn to be a leader at Maine. So I think it's a smart move for him to go there, and if he works, he is gonna be brilliant. He's gonna be really, really good. But there is the thing of like, and my dog becomes annoyed or some things, but my dog did not like that pick, I guess. But no, I think if it works great. But yeah, I think that's a very, very good pick here for Detroit. Oh, not Detroit, Montreal.
Yeah, so we're waiting on Chase. So Bradley Nadeau would be our pick, so we'll give him a couple more minutes here. He did open the chat, so it seems like he is available at this time, so we'll see. But again, just to run through the players that are still available based on who we have ranked highest, it's Stenberg, Height, Jaden Perron, Grayson Sachin, Bradley Nadeau, Michael Rabel, and Trey Augustine, the two top goalies, William Whitelaw, Caden Price, Cone Jimmer, I believe is how you pronounce the name, all still available towards the end of this first round here. And still nothing yet, so Bradley Nadeau seems to be the pick at this spot. And the next pick is Vegas. Let me see, I'm pretty sure they don't have... They do. It is Niels, but Niels is a little unavailable, I think. You text him again real quick. I believe Chase started typing and then stopped, so I think he may have his pick in for pick number 30. Or sorry, 29. No, 31.
Oh, yeah, 31, I think.
Yeah, pick 31.
With all the expansion, there's so many teams, so many picks to go through each round.
Yeah, that's why a lot of teams don't really value the late first as much as they used to.
Yeah. Although I feel like in this one you should. Like,
in this draft,
generally get someone
in this draft, yes, but at the same time, if you can trade back, you should, because there's so many guys. Mm-hmm. It's so close. Outside the top like 15 or so prospects, it gets really razor thin between a lot of the prospects. So, I mean, early second, late first, I think is pretty close in value, generally speaking, but in this draft especially, because of how close it is and how many good prospects there are. It's a really deep draft. So let's see. Still no update here, so we'll just go Montreal takes Bradley Nadeau there. And then we'll start the Vegas conversation next. So, again, with Bradley Nadeau now taken off the board, who is a Vegas pick that's still available?
Stenberg.
What was that?
Otto Stenberg.
Otto Stenberg. He has fallen. He keeps falling. We stopped discussing his name a little bit, but he's still available. Let's see if he still hasn't responded. So, are you comfortable taking Stenberg here, Fred, for Vegas?
I think that's a very good pick for Vegas. Again, they haven't really been great at keeping their drafted players necessarily, but he's also a player where, again, bet on upside, bet on his great shot and offensive abilities, bet on his compete level, and hope that it's the Sweden version you get all the time. I think that's a good pick for Vegas.
So it looks like Chase has actually made selections, but it hasn't gone through.
Oh, what the?
So he's had bad service.
Oh god. What if you want to change after?
So I'm gonna see if he's okay sticking with Nadeau here before we go into Stenberg with Vegas.
Because I think, though, as much as I think it's a sensible pick for Montreal, it is also a little bit of a potential reach for some. I think some people have him lower than in the first round, like going mid-second round. I've seen him go, and I can see Perron as well work. So Perron makes sense there.
So he took Jaden Perron at 32. So we'll switch Nadeau for Perron here.
Yep.
So Jaden Perron instead of Bradley Nadeau. That's the only change. Is Vegas still taking Stenberg there?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think so.
I think so. I think Stenberg makes so much sense for them.
All right. So with that, Vegas takes Stenberg at 32. So that ends the first round of this mock draft. Took us a while to get here, but we finally got here. So we're going to speed things up here in the second round. We'll keep discussions short and sweet. Just a quick overview of the player. We'll kind of rotate through who talks so we can speed it up again a little bit. So starting off the second round, we have, if it'll load, the Anaheim Ducks. So Anaheim is controlled by someone, I'm almost certain.
That's me.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Okay, so I think the Anaheim Ducks probably go for someone big here, but there's a chance they go for someone more dynamic, and that's why I'm taking Grayson Sauchin here, 33rd overall, one of the most dynamic players in the draft. He's physical, aggressive, in your face. He slowed down a lot as the season wore on, but there were some extenuating circumstances that led to that. So I think he's one of the highest upside picks in the draft. Anaheim values this type of player. So, yeah, nice fit for what they're trying to build and a real good upside swing with high likelihood of playing as well.
You said Grayson Sauchin, correct?
Yeah.
All right. I wasn't sure if I heard that correctly or not. Kind of cut out a little bit. So Grayson Sauchin to the Anaheim Ducks. And Ben is up next. Let's see if he'll be able to answer here. I know he's busy. Nope, looks like he's able to respond pretty quick. So
awesome.
Columbus on the clock. Let's see who Ben takes with the remaining players. I'll run through it again. So still available is Riley Heidt and Bradley Nadeau, Michael Rabel, the goalie, Trey Augustine, another goalie, Will Whitelaw. So Ben actually went with Oliver Bonk, which I think is a really interesting pick. He's a little bit lower. He's 46th on the consensus, but Oliver Bonk is the pick for Columbus there.
You quite like him, if I recall correctly, Kyle.
Yes. I'm not super... I mean, I've been updating my rankings pretty much every day, but he's 23rd for me. I really like Oliver Bonk. I think he provides good upside. I wouldn't say he's the safest pick. I wouldn't say I'm the most comfortable taking him, but I think the value he brings to the table is intriguing at the least. And I think, this draft class is a tale of two stories of, you have these big swings like Andrew Cristall and Grayson Sauchin, Caden Price on defense, Will Whitelaw, right? These potential late first-round picks are big swings, high upside, but not the highest of floors and not the safest of picks. And then you have the other side of the story with safer picks like Molgard and Gauthier and Stenberg. I had to go back to my list here. So you have some safer picks, you have some riskier picks, and so I think it's just up to preference at this point in the draft. I think once you get a little bit deeper, it comes down to preference and who you personally believe in, who you personally value. So I think at the end of I think Bonk is just a guy I trust to pick more than some of the guys still on the board, but based on consensus, a little off the board. Since Carson Bjarnason's pick, that's the furthest out we've gone from the consensus. But still, again, a really good pick. I think it brings a lot of value to the table. So yeah, I really like that pick for Columbus, 100%. And that brings us to Toronto, which is Sam. So let me notify Sam. I should have done that earlier. I apologize. So remember, Toronto has this pick because of the earlier trade. He's already taking charge. He's already typing it into this spreadsheet.
I will say I'm intrigued by what Sam picks, considering what he gave up for that, which is essentially of his convertible goal. So I'm kind of intrigued by what he gets for this.
Yeah, so he traded down. He gave Chicago took Molgard with the pick that he traded, and he takes Charlie Stramel with the Toronto pick at 35, which I think is a real Toronto pick at that spot, especially with Matt Nyes being the recent pick. Mitch, if you want to talk about Charlie Stramel a bit.
Yeah, he's super annoying to play against. That's kind of his thing. He gets in your way. He pushes you. He talks trash to you. You try to get off for a line change, and for some reason he's over there now, standing in front of you. Yeah, real annoying to play against, but also a pretty skilled player. I think that's the real question, though. So now with Mike Hastings being in charge of Wisconsin, they don't have the worst coach in NCAA hockey anymore. He's going to be in an environment that is going to allow him to create and thrive. And we might see those offensive skills that he had with the National Team Development Program shine again. it's a swing. You're expecting a lot of skating improvement. You're hoping that the skill returns and then improves dramatically. But yeah, he's pretty likely to play in the NHL because he brings so much.
And next up is the Tampa Bay Lightning, which is my pick. Now, I traded into the second round. That's how the Tampa Bay Lightning got this pick with the San Jose Sharks, which is Fred. So thankfully he's on here so he can talk from his side a little bit. But just to quickly run through why I made the trade, we don't have picks. We just don't have picks. The Lightning don't have picks at all over these next couple of years. And we have some tough decisions to make with free agents, one of which is Ross Colton. I don't want to see Colton go. He's one of my favorite players. I absolutely love what he brings to the table. He's got a clutch gene in him. Back when they played Montreal in the Stanley Cup Finals, he had the series-clinching goal. Not just a game-winning goal, not just a goal in the final game of the series, but the cup-winning Stanley Cup goal there. So I don't want to see him go, but in this scenario, he seems to have priced himself out of Tampa. Reports are that Alex Killorn is being heavily pursued by Tampa, so it looks like they've prioritized him over Colton. So with his RFA rights, that gives him a little bit more trade value because the team he's being traded to will have full rights of him for the offseason. In San Jose, I mean, they have cap space, and Colton has some upside here in a bigger role, and that's why he was able to land me a second-round pick. So before you talk about why you made the trade at San Jose, my selection, which I had in my mind the day that I got this pick, was defenseman Bo Akey. I know that's probably not the most popular pick at that spot, but watching the Tampa Bay Lightning decor this year blew my mind. It was so aggravating. It was terrible watching some of these guys play. Hedman took a step back. Sergachev was wildly inconsistent. They need defensemen in the pipeline. I didn't like their pick of, I don't even remember his name. That's how much I don't like the pick from a couple years back. Roman Schmidt. Never liked that pick since day one. He hasn't really done much since being picked. They need defensemen. And I think he's in a similar mold of a Nick Perbix, but more offensively inclined. I think he plays a very well-balanced game. He's very, very smart from the back end. He's really good offensively, but he doesn't take a whole lot of risks, which I really, really like, and that's what Tampa really needs. And I know he's still a couple years out, but he's a guy that I've fallen in love with as a second-round pick. And if Tampa can trade up and get him, oh man, that'd be phenomenal.
Yeah, so the reason why I think it's a good pick for Tampa, you said it yourself, that's been the back end kind of let Tampa down, and it is something that probably needs to be adjusted little by little. Tampa still still have a window to win, mind you. Their window is not closed at all. As long as you have Stamkos, Vasilevsky, Kucherov, Point, you're not in the not win scenario. So I think if they can fill in the gaps that they need steadily, I think that makes sense. The reason why I've made this trade, which could have been, again, it's a good player that you give up if you trade away the 35th pick?
Yeah.
I think it is.
36th.
Yeah, 36th pick. If you trade that pick away, you are going to probably give up on a good prospect. And while San Jose needs prospect, they need to develop, they need a complete rebuild, you also need players who knows how to win, to solidify a winning culture for the new kind of team, new core of the team to solidify around. Ross Colton knows how to win. He has played under the best coach in terms of winning over the past 3, 4, 5 years. He knows what it takes, and having him as a leader, not necessarily as the best player on the team, but as a leader who the young kids can look up to and see work hard every single shift he's on the ice, work hard every single day at practice, matters. And I think for that, and for established player like that, I think it's okay to give up a second-round pick, especially considering the players you've gotten in Michkov, and I need to remember to make sure I get the right player name. Yeah, and Dragicevic. I think when you have those two, you solidify a bit of a prospect pool, as well with Eklund and some of the other players coming up. You need someone to look up to, someone who is established in the NHL, who has made it, who is there. and who they can play with when they come up. And I think Ross Colton fits that completely.
Yeah, 100%. And it's tough seeing him go as a Lightning. Now, this won't happen most likely. I mean, it's, in my opinion, the value's there. You said it yourself. I mean, you agreed to the trade. So it's possible, but I don't know if it happens. I don't know if Tampa goes that route. But if they do, I think Bo Akey is an excellent pick. I love that pick there. And the next one on the board is pick number 37, Calgary. Sam Tierpak there. Again, that was the Josh Anderson trade that I had mentioned earlier. He took Riley Heidt, who he's fallen quite a bit here based on consensus. But at the same time, I'm very, very low on him. I know you're kind of low on him as well, Fred. Mitch, do you want to talk about the Riley Heights trade? Since me and Fred are kind of on the same page here, and we'll talk about why. But take us through what you think about Height.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan either. I have him more as a mid-second type of talent. There's a lot of production there, but he was kind of in the perfect situation that a prospect could ever be in. All the offense goes through him. Mistakes don't matter. He can be as inefficient as he wants, and he's not like a super dynamic skater or a lane creator. He's more of a get the puck, move it to the open teammate. He has a little bit of flash from the power play, but he's abrasive. He's physical. He plays with a bit of an edge. And Calgary has historically valued sort of undersized, smaller-ish players who can do that. I think Calgary in height is a pretty natural fit. For me, though, I think he's more of a 45 and on type talent, which I can't wait to be wrong when he scores 140 points next year out of nowhere. That's how it goes.
So the reason why I'm low on height is I don't see the hockey sense. Like, you look at a guy like Zach Benson and his ability to attack empty space without the puck and to be a threat without the puck. Height does not possess that, in my opinion. And again, that's just from what I've seen. I've only seen a small handful of his games, but from what I've seen and from what I've tracked, he's just so unimpressive away from the puck. When he has the puck in his hands, he's good. He's not a bad player at all. He has the raw talent, unquestionable raw talent, that has carried him this far in his career. So obviously he's got some unbelievable traits, because he wouldn't be where he is if he didn't have those traits. But in terms of the mental side of the game, in terms of discipline, I know, Fred, you touched on that when talking to me about him. Discipline's not always there. Play reading isn't always there. Anticipation isn't always there, especially away from the puck. So I have really big concerns about his coachability at the next level. Will he be able to, make the adjustments to the style and the scheme that his team is playing? So that's why I'm concerned. I have him ranked really, really low. Just to put it in perspective, after fully updating my list here, I actually have Height as my 76th ranked prospect, which is considerably lower from everybody else on this list. So not the biggest fan. Sam's a smart guy. He's one of the best, and he's taught me so much about scouting and all that. But I don't know. Bit of a questionable pick for me at that spot with Calgary.
Yeah, like I think it was like in the playoff he took like the worst penalty you can take, and it was a thing of like mistakes didn't matter throughout the regular season, and he played like it. And then when the playoff came, he made that mistake where it actually mattered, and I think that kind of opened some eyes for some people who have been like, he plays an unselfish, selfish game, which is an oxymoron and a half, but he plays very, very he plays with a lot of upside, yet also doesn't quite utilizes it. I think he doesn't shoot enough, plain and simple. He needs to shoot more when he has a chance, because he has a really good shot. But he tries to force a golden pass, it gets taken away, and then offense becomes defense suddenly, and it's like just frustrating player to watch, in my opinion. And
very,
if he can get coached, he's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
But the question is that if he can.
So looks like Chase unable to get to his phone. It could be service again, but with Arizona, who do you guys think they take there?
I like the pick that Sam has put in here.
Trey Augustine to Arizona. Would you agree with that, Mitchell? Do you think they go with a goalie?
Yeah, it makes sense. It fits. They already have so much talent at every position. Add another goalie, big name, lots of talent. Not that I would know, but
And
still.
Augustine is again. I said he is so used. He's so clutch. He's such a clutch goalie. Like
It's not
he
only
finds ways
that.
to win game.
It's not only that, but I remember I was scouting an NTDP game. I forget who I was focusing on, but it was towards the end of the year, and the pregame warm ups and stuff like that. I was skipping through it, and I had to go back for a second because it didn't look right. I went all the way back. At the time, Augustine had one loss, and he had like a 950 save percentage in 20 some odd games, and that is just so mind boggling for a goalie to have those stats. But yeah, I think Augustine's the right pick here if they're going to go with a goalie, which leaves Rabel on the board, who is the top ranked goalie on consensus. But yeah, I think Trey Augustine's the right pick there.
The thing for me that I think he needs Augustine is the biggest weakness of it is he slightly overcommits to the shot a little bit. Like he overcommits a little bit towards that and leaves himself relying a lot on his agility to come back if the pass comes or if there's a rebound. I would like to see him maybe balance that a little bit so he doesn't have to rely too much on his great speed and side to side movement.
Yeah, I mean, most goalies have that struggle too, though. It's not like it's something you don't expect with a young goalie, especially like rebound control. And you saw that with some of the Russian three is what I called it of goalies back in 2015 with Igor Shesterkin, Ilya Samsonov, and Ilya Sorokin. Those guys didn't have the best rebound control at the time, but all three have really developed. I mean, we see it now. Ilya Sorokin more recently. Samsonov kind of came into his own a little bit with Toronto this season, and obviously Igor Shesterkin's an unbelievable goalie, arguably the best in the league at this time. That's how good he has been. So
I remember a very similar debate happening for Askarov, where he could not hold on to his stick and he kept on giving rebounds away and had to scramble to get back, and that was a concern that he can't play with North American hockey where that's more prevalent. Yada yada yada. Comes up to the AHL and dominates. Yeah, that is a discussion that's weirdly blown out of proportion.
all right, that brings us to pick number 39, which is Buffalo, controlled by Sammy. He took Bradley Nadeau out of whatever shithole he plays at in the BCHL. It was his words. So he goes with Nadeau at 39. What are your thoughts on that, Mitch? Because I know we've kind of talked over you a bit here.
Yeah, Nadeau's a pretty exciting prospect. Big shot, good at getting open, good at using his shot under pressure. He can pass too. It's just a matter of, I think a lot of it is hidden by being in a situation where he can do whatever he wants. He can just beat opponents with his hands. He doesn't have to pass. I think when he goes to college, he's going to pass more. And so, yeah, and this kind of fits what Buffalo does. They like their upside swings. They like adding talent who kind of has a lot of different directions that their game can go in after being drafted. Nadeau will obviously continue to be a shooter, but you're going to see a lot more playmaking out of him. So, great fit for Buffalo.
And that brings us to pick number 40 here for Washington. That is controlled by you, Fred. Who are you going with at pick number 40?
Yeah, that's a difficult part of like finding out where. Again, I said this when I picked the first time with Washington. It's a hard team to figure out because they are suddenly in a situation where they have to rebuild pretty much from scratch. And we talked about goalies before. I was actually hoping Trey Augustine would fall to this point because they do, goaltending wise, I don't think they have that much from what I remember. I'm trying to remember who they would have in the system. Let me just really quickly check to make sure I'm not forgetting someone obvious because that would look terrible on me. They got cut Darcy Kemper, which is fine, but again, a more
he's more of an
older
older
option.
veteran guy there.
Yeah, so I think they need a goaltending option, and given that we have taken the two others, I think this is where it makes sense to pick who we had as the highest one on our consensus, Mikael Habel, as the Slovak goaltender, potentially the future of the Capitals.
Yeah, 100%. I think, again, he was the top-ranked goalie in the consensus here. I think that's a good pick for Washington, which takes us to the next 3 picks. All of them Detroit. And none of the... Detroit does not have a GM. So to make this go by quick, how all of us pick one player for Detroit. I think that makes the most sense, just to run through it real quick. So Mitch, if you want to take the first pick here for Detroit, kind of set the stage.
Does someone want to go? Someone want to go before me?
Yeah,
Sorry,
I can.
Something just came up.
Yeah, I can
I'll
go
be ready in a
before you
minute
really
or two.
quick for Detroit. So, with their first pick, I think this one screams Detroit. Big Swedish development program out in Detroit. I think they go with David Edstrom, a center there. I think that's a great pick. I really like Edstrom. It just makes sense when I look at the list and I look to see who's still available. David Edstrom just makes sense, and center's such a valuable position too. I think that's my pick there. I don't know if you want to go next, Fred, or if you're looking.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my own list a little bit to make sure. Because I was actually looking at Estrom making sense as well, so...
Yeah, so I can go through who's still available here. There's Will Whitelaw. So in order from consensus, it's William Whitelaw, Caden Price, Cone Jimmer, Kasper Haltinen, Tanner Molendyke, Theo Lindstein, Anton Wahlberg, and Alex Chiernik. Still available.
Honestly, I feel like Price, I could see that fit a lot. Like, I don't... Like, I think he reminds me a little bit of the whole... the Islanders had suddenly come up Brian Pollock and Adam Pelech. I think there is some of that to his game, and where it's like very balanced, very, very good all around player that just plays a smart game in pretty much any situation he's put on the ice on ball. He's not gonna blow you away, but he's gonna be very sensible, and I feel like that's a pick I could see them make within these 3. Like, it's just a very, very good player that if he hits his stride, is gonna be a very, very solid and good second pair defenseman.
Yeah, and Sam, just to throw that out there, Sam also said Hunter Brustevich. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And Cone Jimmer are the 2 he would pick for the next 2. So does that change your opinion at all on Price, or are you going to stick with Price there?
I was looking at Brustevich.
Yeah, Brustevich is how it was pronounced. I have a buddy who's played with them in the past when they were like 14 years old. I think it's Brustevich.
That's a very, very good. That's a very good pick as well, actually. And it's a very, very... Actually, I think I'll change it to that. I like that. It's a very, very, again, like, good, solid player who just... You were ramping on in the group chat about him, recently, about his qualities as just a good player in, again, pretty much all situations you put him in. He's gonna be okay. He's not scared.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great pick. I really like Brustevich. He's in my top 30. I raved about him. I've been late with my rankings, which is why I always switch up when we're talking discussions on players. New names pop up. It's because I was still updating it over the last week or so because I want to put out a top 100 and I'm still a little behind. So, but yeah, I really like Brustevich. He's in my top 30 currently. And so that takes us to Mitch with the last pick for Detroit here. Who are you going with?
So I think Zemer is a pick that they might go for, but I'm going to look at their previous draft record, and A, they like this type of player, and B, they have his brother. So I wonder if they go Noah Dow Nielsen here.
Ooh. I think that's a good pick. So
I'm at the stage now where I'm just trying to predict what teams are going to do rather than picking my favorite player. So
right.
I wonder if Dow Nielsen is where we're going.
I could see that.
So you're debating those 2 names, Jimmer and Dower Nielsen?
And definitely going Dower Nielsen. Now that I've said it out loud, for sure. Or Zemer just falling down, but that's all right.
There's gonna be a happy team if he does that in the real draft. That's for sure.
So Noah Dower Nielsen to Detroit. That rounds out those 3. That brings us to Chicago, which is Wally. Let's see if he's available. I think he should be. He's been fairly active in the group chat. But the next pick is Buffalo, which is Sam. He's been quick. Nashville. Chad said he's not available for his Nashville pick, so those two picks are going to be in discussion. Calgary's Sam. So we have some discussions ahead of us, but first it's Chicago. Wally has opened the text. So hold on, I forgot to say on the clock there. I just tagged him. Didn't tell him why I tagged him, but hopefully he'll be pretty quick with it. Some names to pay attention to while we're waiting for Wally to make his selection. Will Whitelaw still available? I think he screams Chicago Blackhawks prospect there. He just feels right. Caden Price, Cone Jimmer still available. Obviously, he's been falling. Who knows if they finally take him there. Oh, there you go. Callan Lind was the selection for Chicago there. I think that's an interesting one. If you wanted to talk about that a little bit, Fred.
I almost want to give that to Mitchell. I saw your head movement there.
Yeah, I was hoping that he would slip to Anaheim for their 2 late second rounders. He's an Anaheim pick through and through. Physically raw, but super aggressive. He's a skilled playmaker, but you don't see it because Red Deer just sticks 2 players in front of the net at all times, so he doesn't really have any real passing options. So he's more of a net front finisher, bouncing off checks, deflecting pucks, getting open for rebounds and stuff. I think he's got a lot of long-term upside. Like, he could be the guy who we look back on in the draft in a few years and is like, wait a second, this guy went like 45th. He could be a top 20 guy in the draft. He has the skill. He has the pedigree. He's just in a situation that doesn't quite mesh with his skill set.
Yep, 100%. And again, we're just waiting on Sammy here. He's pretty quick, though. He's probably going to write it in himself. So I'm just waiting to see the icon on the spreadsheet over here pop up with him typing. But knowing Sam and kind of having an idea of who I think he's going to go for, I don't think we see Jimmer fall much further here. I think he's going to scoop him up. I can just see Sam taking him here. I mean, Whitelaw is still available, but not many people are super high on him. Caden Price is still available, but again, there's guys that have him ranked outside the top 50, so that's a wild card. When you look at Cone Jimmer outside of Smart Scouting, who has him at 75, he's a top 50 pick across the board outside of that one ranking here. Kasper Haltinen's another one on the board here still, but again, rankings are all over the place, so he's another one that could go just about anywhere. Let's see if he's made his pick here. It looks like he's typing it in now. Let's see. That or he's still debating, because Sam has a few names up here. If I know Sam well, I know that he's debating Jimmer, Haltinen, and Molendyk. Or Molendyk, how's it pronounced?
I don't know. It depends. Sometimes the home broadcast says Molendyk, other times he says Molendyk, so I'm not sure. And when they play like the thing and like the games and stuff, and they say his name, I've never actually been able to catch it, so I have no idea. So I mean, I guess we'll just go with Molendyk. That seems to be how most people say it. But
can we also, while we have a second, can we also talk about the Chicago Steel announcers this year? Every time Perron touched the puck, it was always Puma Perron with the puck or some like weird nickname. He only used nicknames.
The guy's been making up the names for the last few years. Like, so they've all had nicknames going back to the last few years. Like Coronado was the Bison, and so on.
I only noticed it this year. So it just threw me off because every time he touched the puck, he's like, the Puma has the puck. I'm like, who's the Puma? Because sometimes I can't see the numbers, so I kind of rely on the commentators a little bit so I know who has the puck. And it threw me off every single time. So yeah,
I hate how they did that black number on gray jersey thing with that standard definition camera. It makes it so hard to track the games.
Very.
I dreaded all
I lost a lot of what's the word I'm looking for here? Like, it just discouraged me from scouting because I struggled with tracking with those crappy camera qualities and the awful jersey designs for tracking. But Sam has made his pick. It is Anton Wahlberg. Didn't see that one coming. Not to say that Wahlberg's a bad pick, but because knowing Sam, he usually is the guy that grabs the ones that are falling. So a little bit, not off the board so much, but not what I was expecting him to take. But a good pick nonetheless, Anton Wahlberg. He's a top 50 guy for me. He's got some first-round rankings from Craig Button. So certainly a guy that could go around this spot or earlier. Next pick is Nashville. So the next two picks are Nashville. So we can discuss who Nashville can take there. Let's see. Do you think it's due time for Cone Jimmer to be selected here?
Yep. Yeah, I think it's Zimmer time, and I think it's probably either Caden Price or Tanner Melendick time.
And Sam also put out for the second pick, Haltonen seems like a Nashville fit. I was going to say either him or Melendick for Nashville, but I think Haltonen does make sense here. What do you guys think?
He does, yeah. Okay, I'm cool with Haltonen too.
All right, so it looks like let's see, what pick was that? It was 46 and 47. So Jimmer at 46, Haltonen at 47. There you go. So those are the two picks for Nashville. And then it's Calgary, which is Sam. So won't have to wait hopefully too long for that. So yeah, it's Jimmer and Haltonen. Mitch, if you want to talk about Jimmer for a bit while I update the sheet.
So he's one of these weird players where he has all the puck skills. He's very aggressive. He can defend. He can deke. He can shoot. He can pass. It just comes down to his skating. His stride is wide. His lower back is super rounded. Like, it's really a question as to how he's so able to absorb contact when he's bent over like that. There are lots of guys in the NHL who do have unorthodox skating. Like Ryan O'Reilly is probably the most similar skater to him in terms of how he looks. But even O'Reilly doesn't skate as, let's call it mechanically compromising as Zimmer does. And so for him, it's going to come all down to skating. If it improves even a little bit, he'll play. He can play in the top 9. But at 210 pounds, 6'1", there might not be as much physical development there. And so it's going to come down to changing a lot of stuff off the ice to get him to that point. So long-term project.
And Fred, you want to talk about Haltonen there? I believe, was it you or Ben that wrote about him for Last Word?
I think it was Ben who wrote. I think we talked about him. Both of us weren't particularly high on him. I think there is some risk in his game he is raw. He needs time, and I'm a bit concerned by how he did in the Finnish league this year. I think there were signs of like where some of those good things that you have seen from him before kind of didn't seem like it worked in the pro league, and he needs to learn how to play in the pros, and I'm worried it's gonna be similar to what we've seen a few other Finnish players happen recently, where they might make it but not quite to what you expected them to do.
Right. And with that takes us to pick 48, which was Sam with Calgary. And he went a little off the board here. Not totally off the board, but he went with a goalie, and it was Jacob Fowler from the Youngstown Phantoms. So I'm not too familiar with Fowler. Haven't watched too many or paid attention to too many of his games. But he has really intriguing stats with Youngstown. So, Fred, I don't know if you've watched him at all or can add to that.
Sorry, who was it?
Jacob Fowler, Youngstown Phantoms.
Yeah. I think in terms of the goalies that's left, absolutely a good goalie. I think he has a lot of, he has everything you want in a young goalie. The question is, of course, can he build onto what he has? Fundamentally, he's fine. His fundamentals in terms of butterfly, in terms of how he positions himself, in terms of how he kind of acts in net, the presence. I always talk a little bit, and I think, Kyle, you're a goalie as well, right?
I've played goalie, yeah.
Yeah, you know how important presence is. Like, basically the presence that if the puck hits you, there's not going to be any drama. You're not going to flap around trying to look after the puck. I think he does that really well, playing that it's his crease. there is some things that he needs to build on in that regard, and I still need to see more to have him as high as I have the other four. But as a pick here for a team that needs a goalie, he's definitely one I would not mind seeing. And I think for Calgary, that's a good destination. They've been good at developing.
And so next is the New York Islanders, which is a discussion for us, as there's no one that owns the Islanders, but runs the Islanders for this mock. So with the Islanders here, one name kind of pops out to me, and you might not agree because, I mean, it's the Islanders. It's very difficult to kind of predict. They have their type, right? But there's not a lot of those types left in the draft that I see. I'm tempted to go with Nick Lardis here. I don't know if that's a name that kind of sticks with you with the Islanders or not, but him and Suniev are the two names that kind of pop out to me for the Islanders. But I'm not too sure if that's early or not for them. Seems a bit early.
I think Lardis could be a first rounder. I don't know if he'll be a first rounder for teams, but he measured at the combine at 5'11". He's the same size as Jaeger now. You add in the fact that he scored a ton down the stretch like a new player. He's a burner, one of the fastest players in the draft. I think there's a real chance that he goes a fair bit earlier than where he is here. So, I mean, I have no idea what the Islanders like. I look at their draft record, and it's just a mess. And they don't have many picks, and it's usually somewhat boring. But Lardis could very well be that. If not, I think Lardis to Seattle he's the perfect player for them. So one of these next two picks, Lardis, makes sense for me.
And what do you think, Fred, for the Islanders here? Because Sam said Theo Lindstein. He says they have a good history of picking random Swedes in the draft. So,
and I mean, I can see that as a player pick up as well. Lindstein, I think, he has steadily risen on my block like all year. Like he was very low in the start of it, but it's like really kept on climbing a little by little. So I can see that being an Islanders thing where they go, okay, his progression has been really good. Let's take the Swede and see if we cannot build him into being a player that we can add to our roster in a couple of years. But I also see the idea of Lardis here. It's two players that's very interesting. Like both players make sense for the Islanders. And it's a weird situation because the Islanders probably need more high-end talent. Like they probably need higher picks, but they simply don't have them. But yeah, I think both make sense. I would be fine with both.
So we'll go Lardis now, or Lindstein or Lardis for now. We'll have Ben be the deciding factor maybe a bit here. Who would you pick if you're the Islanders? You're muted, by the way, just in case. Ben, you're muted. There you go.
Right. So I'm just trying to catch up with the board here because I was out for about half an hour. I had a meeting I couldn't avoid. But just catching up, the one name that stands out to me as the best rated player that hasn't been picked and has fallen further than I thought is Molendyk. But I don't.
Looks like he froze here.
Yeah.
I know he said his computer died earlier, so I don't know if maybe that's the case again. But so it sounds like you said Molendyk. But on that note, he said he's fallen a bit. Last Words rankings have him at Lindstein at 40 and Molendyk at 42. So
Okay.
Good, Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Okay.
No worries at all. So you said Molendyk was one that has fallen far? Looks like Ben might be having technical issues. But
Yeah.
I think Lindstein, based on what Sam said, I think Lindstein's good for the Islanders there. Also, Lindstein's the highest rated for Last Words board. He's at 40. Molendyk's at 42. which I mentioned earlier. So I think it's Lindstein, honestly, for the Islanders.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Are you okay with that, Ben?
Yeah. Awesome.
I cannot type. There we go. That's still not right. There we go. All right, so I'm up on the board now with the Kraken. Now, my original pick was going to be Lindstein, but it was between Lindstein and Molendyk. So I'm going to go ahead and take Molendyk for Seattle. I think his upside is great. Ben mentioned it earlier. He's fallen a lot further than I personally expected as well. I mean, he's 31 on my board. He's my personal highest or best player still available in this class. There's a couple guys that have kind of leaked through that are unsurprising, but for my board have fallen pretty far. But I'm comfortable taking Molendyk with that pick there for Seattle. I think, again, they don't have much to lose. They have a lot of picks. They're a cup contending team at this point after what we saw this year. Whether they keep that going moving forward and continue being a team that can make deep postseason runs is to be determined. But as of right now, what we saw in the postseason, they're a really good team. Have a lot of picks. They can take who they want. Best player available on my board is Molendyk, though, so that's why I go with him there. Which brings us to now, Chicago, which is Wally. So let me let him know that he's on the board here. And there we go. So yeah, I really like Molendyk, honestly. I think he has a high ceiling. And I think his defensive game is underrated. I think a lot of people, I mean, especially in this class, with how nitpicky people can get with rankings now, I think it's kind of a bit overblown, or not overblown, but I think his defensive game certainly slips through the cracks from a lot of outlets. I think he plays a more balanced game than he's given credit for, but obviously his offensive game is where he gets his value, and I think he has a lot of potential there. Maybe not like a top pairing defenseman per se, but I see Molendyk as a guy that could be a number 3, number 4 defenseman for an NHL team, obviously if all things go well. But I think he has that potential to be a top 4 guy for an NHL team in the future. And then Chicago, we're waiting on Wally. And he's going to go ahead and take Adam Gajan. I think is how you pronounce it. Correct me if I'm wrong. So Adam Gajan goes to the Chicago Blackhawks, which was Tampa's original pick. That's a good pick. Do you guys have any thoughts on Gajan, Mitch, or Fred, whoever wants to speak?
I'll be honest, I don't have too much on him. He's one of those that I was never overly high on. Like, he never, for me, he lacked something that I cannot really explain that well, but he never caught my attention that much, so I never really was high on him. I never feel like he got it back. Like, sometimes you see a player and you go, where is all the hype about? You watch them again and you still, they then go, oh, that was the hype. For me, I never quite saw it with Gajan. So I think if others have something that I might have missed, I think that makes sense for them to speak more.
He's not ranked on my board. I haven't gotten a good look on Gajan, so I can't really speak too much on him. I don't have much information, like you said, Fred. So yeah, that's the first, I guess, puzzling pick. So far, I mean, it's a second-round pick. Chicago's had a lot of picks. They took Callan Lind earlier in the round, so that's a great pick there. They've also taken... Where is it? They've had quite a few, so... they also took Molgaard with their last first-round pick, which I know Fred's a huge fan. He talked about him a bit. They also took Quentin Musty, who's one of the higher upside players, who Mitchell's a big fan of, as well as myself. And additionally, they obviously took Connor Bedard. Connor Bedard. Sorry, we are talking about Chicago. They took Connor Bedard. So, I mean, it's a great draft class. They take a risk with Adam Gage in there, which, again, I don't have enough on him to truly say much about him, but it's not a bad swing to take. Which brings us back to Seattle. which again, I'm Seattle here, and I'm going to go ahead and take... I'm going to go ahead and take William Whitelaw. I think I'm a big fan of Whitelaw. I think he's a guy that high energy presence, has some upside there that he doesn't get a whole lot of credit for. Plays a pretty complete game for the most part. He might not be the best defensively per se, but he thrives in chaos. And players like that, if he can reel in his game a little bit and become a little bit more mature with how he attacks, could be a really interesting and fun player to watch in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and take Whitelaw with Seattle's pick, which takes us to Minnesota, which is Fred, as the next pick.
You have a habit of taking my player right in front of me, you know. It's the second time you've done that in Seattle as well, because I was thinking Whitelaw as well, because I love him. He reminds me of, I'm going to say Yanni Gord, but with slightly higher ceiling. And I know that's the pick that makes you happy.
Yes,
For that
I love
reason.
Gord.
Like, that's a comparison. Where do we go now? I think I'm gonna go. I kind of said before that Minnesota has such a deep prospect pool that they need someone who might have some that they don't really necessarily have a positional need. So I'm kind of gonna go with the best player available, both in our rank and in my rank, Caden Price, defenseman. I think there is obviously some things that needs to be worked on. But I think when you look at his game, I think he is a fine skater, although that possibly needs a little bit of fine tuning. But also his biggest struggle is consistency. If he can find consistency, he is going to be a phenomenal two-way defender who can both be good defensively, shutting down the rush, keeping gap controls, but also be a good transitional player who can take the puck up the ice, similar to what you see potentially like a Gary Spurgeon do a lot for Minnesota. And I think if he can learn under that mold of players that's coming in, also Brock Faber is there, kind of similar-ish player, in my opinion, maybe a little bit more defensive-minded player, Brock Faber, but there is something that I believe that you can definitely put him into situations in Minnesota where I think he would succeed a lot, Caden Price. And it kind of, again, solidifies, okay, we got a good center that has a bit of a risk to it in our first round. Now we get a defenseman which also has a bit of a consistency risk attached, but again, adds to the prospect pool really well.
Yeah, you broke Sam's heart here. He when he made his trade, he was hoping Price would fall to the 50s. He did, but not quite far enough. Which brings us to LA's pick. There's no GM for that one, so another discussion. But I just want to throw a name out there because it stood out to me when I was looking at who's available, and that's Alex Chernick for LA. Just for some reason stands out as a fit for me. Mitch, would you agree with Alex Chernick there to LA, or would you go with Lardis instead? Because he seems to be high on your list.
Well, they're both speedsters, right? That's kind of their game. I think with Lardis, you're getting a little bit more certainty. Obviously, he's not a certain bet by any stretch of the imagination. He only scored for half of the season, and Hamilton was kind of one of those wide open offensive teams. So it's a little tricky, but I think Lardis is probably the safer one. But I'm also the director of North American scouting. My job is to know 250 North American players. So I don't know Chernick as well as you guys. I only know him based on the Elite Prospects Draft Guide. I haven't seen him outside of international settings. And on that note, I do have to go. I have something else that come up. But I will do the last two Anaheim picks as well. So I just want to thank you guys for your time. It was a blast doing this. It was good to getting to know you all, and I hope we can do this again soon.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you coming on as well.
Yeah,
it was a pleasure. It was a real pleasure.
Have a good
one.
All
right, take care. I'll get my picks in on the sheet. See you.
All
right, sounds good.
So Nick Lardis seems to be the more comfortable pick here. Ben, I don't know if you're familiar with Lardis or Chernick. I think he might be frozen.
I think Lardis makes sense here. So
Lardis?
I'm not against that at all. I say.
All right, so Lardis to LA, which brings us to Toronto, which is Sam's pick. And I have a feeling he's going to go and take a swing here for Toronto. He was looking at defensemen, which is important to remember here. Because he wanted Caden Price. He said he's been debating about a few players at 28. So it might be someone he's personally really high on, which is harder to gauge. But he's going with a defenseman or someone with higher upside. I could see maybe a Timur Mukhanov pick. Although I know us three, we aren't the biggest of fans of Mukhanov. Mukhanov. No, we're not the biggest of fans.
I'm kind of a fan of him. I think I like him. I think he's a bloody poker chip. Like, he can go anywhere. But if he falls into the category of working, he's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, his passing ability, his vision is exceptional. But I think a lot of the difficult passes that he completes doesn't really lead to anything. It's not that the passes are bad, but it's the passes, they're really difficult. He threads the needle through traffic, but it goes to a guy who's not really in a scoring position.
Yeah.
And that's been my biggest concern. I know, actually, Sam's not particularly high on Mukhanov, so I'll take it back. He's probably not going to go with him, but that's a name to look out for moving forward because he has the tools. It's just, can he use them in the right situations and find the right players? That's the biggest thing with him.
Oh yeah, and I think that's a very valid criticism. But we had a long discussion about him up and down. I remember that being a thing we talked about because both of us, like, I feel like his raw tools are so good that it's hard to pass on. Because what you need to teach him is to use them correctly, which is a lot easier said than done, mind you. That is such a, like, you can't just go, oh, you need to do this with, then you change the style that he is, and you have to teach him to be a different player. So there is a lot of factors to figure out, but
right, I think it's kind of like the Capo Caco New York Rangers situation, where the Rangers kind of moved him to more of a defensive kind of style, and now he doesn't have the upside or hasn't hit on his upside the way he was expected to. So it's one of those things where if, he's not as safe of a bet as Caco. Caco was a number 2 overall pick. So by no means am I saying he's a safe pick where he's going to make the NHL. But it's one of those things where if he does make the NHL, he's going to need to be sort of coddled almost. He's going to have to be treated differently than other prospects where, similar to like, let's use Nikita Kucherov, for example, a high-end example, but one that I think is appropriate for this situation. If Kucherov doesn't get top 6 minutes, does he find success? I don't think so. Early on in his career, if he doesn't get top 6 minutes, I don't think Kucherov finds the success that he has to this point in his career just because of his style. I think the same could be said about Mukhanov moving forward, which, take what you will from that, but I think he's a big risk here. I know some people are big on him. I know Smart Scouting put out a big article on him. He's a first-round pick for them. He's a first-round pick for Dauber, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
Yeah, I think Dauber has him quite high.
We have him at 28 with Last Word. Yep. Last Word has him at 28.
I think I was probably the main catalyst for that because I liked what I saw because he's fun to watch. And that sounds like a very, very bad reasoning to necessarily put him on, but when you play a style where you can thread a pass and you are not afraid of doing it, I think that's a thing. There's a lot of players, especially like when they will play in Russia, they will kind of make the smarter move. They won't necessarily try to make like the riskier play. I think it shows that he has confidence, and I'm intrigued if that can take him anywhere.
So Sam put his pick in. It is Carson Ruckopf of the Sudbury Wolves of the OHL, which leads us to the next pick at 56, which is Edmonton, which doesn't have a GM. But let's talk about the Ruckopf pick. I have him at 62. Consensus has him at about 63. So he's closer to the tail end of the second round, which is what we're approaching. Believe it or not, this draft feels like it's taking longer than it has. But we've been moving along quite well, actually. Do you know much about Ruckopf here?
I know. Again, I feel like this draft has a lot of people similar to Ruckopf, like that powerful forward that has a decent skating. Is not that has like a lot of good abilities, but doesn't necessarily, I don't know, master any of them. Like there's a lot of things to like about him. I think he has a really good shot and a lot of power to it.
Yeah, no, he's got a very, very good shot, and he knows how to use it, and he uses it frequently. He's not afraid to shoot the puck. He's a really good skater too. I think his speed, I mean, all of his skating, the whole package needs work. Obviously,
yeah. It's like it's fast, but also it isn't utilized quite enough.
Right,
Like he has the speed to beat people. He generally has the speed to do it, but he doesn't quite do it enough. And I would love to see maybe. I think it's maybe the puck control. I think that lacks the most of him. I think the pucks tend to bubble on him, and that makes him. I guess like insecure about making that power move where he just basically boulders past you and goes, "This is my lane, and you're not getting through to me."
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah,
I agree with that 100%. I think he's very well balanced. He plays a pro style in terms of, again, utilizing his speed more going down the line here over the next couple of years will be important. But I think he's good defensively. He's not great, but he's good defensively, solid. Coaches will like him in that sense where he's reliable enough to put out on the ice. I think his offensive game, especially his playmaking, is a work in progress, certainly. But he has a really good shot, and he loves shooting the puck, and there's roles for that at the NHL level. So I think he has an NHL future ahead of him. How soon is questionable. Could be a couple years. It could be several years. Or, he might not ever make it at all if he doesn't utilize his skating more. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves with Rekoff there, Edmonton is up next. There is no manager for Edmonton here. So let's take a look at what's available. There's Alex Chernik, Luca Cagnoni, Aaron Manetian of the NTDP, Lenny, Haminaho. I hope I'm saying that right.
Yeah, Lenny.
Denver Barkey, Luca Pinelli, and Danny Nelson. For Edmonton, what do you think they're going for here? Because they have Connor McDavid, they have Leon Draisaitl. They're slowly getting their What was that?
They have finally hit like something going on. Like there's finally something where I'm like, okay, Edmonton's moving in the right direction.
The question is, what do they go for here? Because they could go goalies, but the main four goalies are gone. I think they wait for... I
don't think goalies make sense. I think they have Stuart Skinner, and I think that is who they're kind of thinking, that is our guy for the next many of seasons. He's only 24. He has shown that he can at least take him into the playoff. Now he needs to take the next step and show that he can also take them further into the playoff. After let's be honest, not a great showing in his first playoff, but it is also his first playoff. He needs time to potentially get that. I'm looking at like what they need, like in the prospect pool, like maybe a defenseman.
Do you think they take a big swing on Mukhanov though?
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those teams where I think Edmonton's finally out of that where they need to hit on people, so they can kind of take a risk. They have taken risk anyway, mind you. They still took risk with Philip Broberg and stuff like that, but I think I can see.
Well, if they go, let's just say they go defenseman. What about a guy like Maxim Sturbach?
Ooh, that's a good. That would actually be interesting.
He's not the best skater, right? As a defenseman, he's not the best skater. He's going to have to work on that, but he's got great edge work. He's got good mobility outside of his top end speed.
Yeah.
I mean,
but he plays smart as well with gaps. I think and I think that's all. I think like he's not an unintelligent player which you just skate past, even though you might be faster.
Right, and he's responsible too. Like he doesn't overcommit offensively in a sense where he gives up defense for offense, and I think that's exactly the style that Edmonton needs too. So if they go defense, I think Maxim Sturbach pops off the page a little bit here.
Honestly, I think that will be a great pick for Edmonton, and I think that's like a really sensible one.
I asked Sam for help for Edmonton in the group chat. He said, "Okay, who's the worst player available?" So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take Maxim Sturbach for Edmonton.
So we're taking. I believe he's Slovakian, if I remember. He's from Slovakia. Yeah, he's born in Košice.
Oh well,
Yeah.
Sam's not happy about Sturbach going to Edmonton. So clearly we did the right thing here. Which brings us to pick 57, which is Seattle, which puts me back on the board again. Now that I look at it, I wish I didn't bring up Sturbach, but man, let's see, who should I go with for Edmonton here? Or not Edmonton, Seattle. There's a couple guys that I like on the board still. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take Alex Chernik.
Yep, I think that's a good one. And we kind of went over him as well.
Yeah.
Like a sensible one for Seattle. Seattle is an interesting position where they have so many. Like, I think they're a very, very interesting team, and if they can build on it, like just get in those sensible, smart, good prospects who will just like fill in the lineup, the middle six, that is going to be brilliant for them.
And that brings us to New Jersey. So New Jersey's an interesting one. They have a loaded D-core at this point. Dougie Hamilton is leading the way as a veteran, but they also have Luke Hughes, Saman Nemec. There's a couple other. I know he was playing in the NCAA now.
Who is it?
I was really high on him. I was really high on him too. I can't think of his name now.
Wait, let me quickly. Let's see who it could. Was it? It's not. It's the Casey's. Seamus.
Yeah.
That's you?
Seamus Casey. Yes, Seamus Casey.
Yeah, Seamus
I'm really,
Casey.
really
Seamus
high
Casey,
on him.
yeah.
So I don't think they go defense here. Goalies, there's not really any goalie that impresses me that's still available. I don't know if you have one.
The only one I would have is the hero of the World Juniors for Canada, an overage player, and I think you can wait to get him. I wouldn't take him in the second round, but I would consider the next goalie available that I would probably consider would be Thomas Milik. He was so good in the season in the WHL. The one thing is he's overage, but I don't necessarily think that's the biggest worry when it comes to goaltenders. So if you have to look for a goalie, I would potentially not see that as a terrible pick, but
Right.
I think you can wait around more to get him.
Ooh, I think they go forward though. I really do, and they are a fast team, high upside team, especially with the picks that they take. One name that kind of comes to me a little bit here is Luca Pinelli.
I like that. I like that a lot.
You want to go Luca
yourself
Pinelli
fast. Yeah. But yeah, you said it yourself. A fast team.
here? I mean,
wanting
they're a high
a
upside team
fast
too.
player.
Very, very difficult to defend. Guys like Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt. I mean, it's fast. This team plays with speed. I think Luca Pinelli fits that really, really well. Obviously, he needs to work on his trait overall, his traits. But I think if he hits his stride and he develops really well, this is a kid who can fit really, really, really well with New Jersey's core. He might not be, a top six guy consistently, but I look at Pinelli as a guy who can play comfortably in a middle six role and have some success. And that brings us to the Anaheim Ducks. Hold on one second, let me update.
That was
Which I believe is Mitch Brown.
and he has already put him in.
Oh, he already did. Oh, I thought that was Sam that put it in. All right, so Danny Nelson and Matthew Mania. Now, I like Matthew Mania quite a bit. He's within my second round. I think he has some upside there. Danny Nelson's more of an interesting one for me. I don't know if you want to touch on Nelson a little bit, and I can touch on Mania while we wait for Dallas. Actually, let's see if we have to wait for anyone for Dallas or if it's not owned by anyone.
Yeah. But yeah.
Dallas isn't owned by anyone, so I like Mania a lot. I think he's an interesting defenseman. Just on the surface of things, he's excuse me. He's a fun guy to watch. Great skater. His edge work, I mean, it's up there with the best in the draft, in my opinion. The way he's able to walk the blue line, his four-way mobility is excellent. He can keep up with play skating backwards. Even the faster guys have trouble getting around him with his gap control. I think his offense is a work in progress. but he's willing and able to hop up into the play when openings are there. He's not afraid to jump up into them and take advantage. I think his vision and his ability to quarterback from the point and on the power play is intriguing. He's very creative and he's got good hands for the back end, so if he ever gets into some trouble, he can use his edges and his hands to get out of it. And again, I think his defensive game, his transitional game is really well-rounded. He's not the best defensively, but defending the rush, he's really solid. I think he's got a lot of upside here in his game, so I like that pick of Matthew Mania for Anaheim late in the second.
Okay.
So now it's Dallas, so that comes down to us two to pick.
I was gonna go with Danny Nelson. I think in terms of his speed and acceleration could probably be better. However, and I think defensively he's not the greatest. However, he is a great playmaker, and he has a he has a deceptive and quick release. Like he's good offensively, and he's good as a center. He moves well for his size. He's quite a big body as well, from what I remember. Like I think he's like 6'2" or 6'3" or something like that. So he has a lot of body that he uses extremely well, in my opinion. I just would like to see maybe a little bit more consistency in each shift, so it's not quite as, are we on the offense, I'm great, but if we're on defense, it's a little bit less. But I think it's a good pick. I think it's really, really nice pick.
So the next two picks are Dallas and Carolina, both teams that don't have a GM. So we'll start with Dallas here. And there's a name that definitely pops up to me as for a Dallas pick, and he's low on a lot of people's boards, and this might come across as a bit of a reach, but he's a guy who was really high on draft boards at the beginning of the year, and that is Cameron Allen. I look at Dallas. He's an offensively oriented defenseman. I look at Dallas and I look at Miro Heiskanen. I look at John Klingberg. I look at, the defensemen that they brought in are high-octane, fast-paced defenders who may not be the best in their own end. Miro Heiskanen, obviously, a little bit of a different story in that case, but still high orientation in the offensive zone. He's very active. I think he fits the mold for the Dallas Stars for the back end. And they have really good young core up front. They have Jake Ottinger in net. I think defense is the way they're probably going to go, and I really like Cam Allen. Another guy is Aram Manetian of the NTDP. Those are the two guys that I've been looking at, though. So who would you pick between Manetian and Allen if you were going defense? Who would you?
I think I would pick Allen here. I think he's a little bit more known, and I think he's a little bit more. You know a little bit more what you're gonna get, and I think he's a little bit, I guess, tried and tested, I would say. And I think for Dallas, they have been really good at that type of defenseman. You mentioned that John Klingberg is a good example of it. Like, they've been really good at developing that specific type. So I think Cameron Allen makes a ton of sense for Dallas. And
next is Carolina, as I mentioned. Carolina is a sneaky team. They're not afraid of taking Russians. They're not afraid of taking big swings. So looking at this list, I'm thinking
Is this where we go with him? Is this where we go with him?
I think this is where Mukhanov falls. Honestly,
I think it makes sense. I think Mukhanov makes would be such a Carolina pick, and it would be like one of those where people afterwards would go, that could bite us that we did not get that. But that's a player that's been so good at developing.
They're very, very good at developing, and yeah, they are not afraid of taking those Russians, and taking advantage of Russians falling in the class because of the political stuff going on.
Yeah, I think the only team I can mention that's doing that as well a little bit is kind of Minnesota has been good at it lately.
Yeah. So next up is Florida. They also do not have anybody running them. So Florida's an interesting one. Ooh, who do they go with? A forward or a defenseman? Because they have Spencer Knight. I don't think they go goalie here.
No. They still have Spencer Knight. I know he hasn't really shined too much, but I still think he's still someone they have to bang on a little bit longer.
Yeah.
What they go for?
I want to say this is where Aram Manetian falls.
You know what? I could see that.
Or would you go with a guy like Luca Cagnoni?
Oh, that's. I could see both of them, but I think I would go Aram Maneti here. I think that's who I would take. I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
He
high
has
on
both what
Manetian.
they look for.
I'm high on Manetian. He's 51 on my board currently. So he's an interesting one to look at. I'm just asking Sam because Sam knows more of the deeper guys than I do.
Yeah. Also, if you want knowledge on like the, I guess, 60 plus prospects that's predicted, he is one of the guys to go for.
Yes, 100%.
But like I like Menetti's skating a lot. I like the way he moves the puck. I think it's very like we talk about like decision making a lot, like the players' decision making and how they see the game and how they make the decisions. I think he makes some really smart ones when he has the puck. So I like him. I like him a lot.
Yeah, I mean his transitional game is excellent. The biggest concern is his defense. He's not the best in the defensive zone. In his own end, he can kind of get caught chasing a bit, and he doesn't win those physical battles too often. But he's very aggressive with the puck. He's very aggressive through transition. I think he's got some real upside to him. But that said, there's not a very big floor.
No, I think you said it yourself. Like his biggest issue is that he needs to, like, as good as he reads the game offensively, he doesn't. He has that issue defensively where he really over analyzes things and tries to win the puck. Well, maybe stay back. And we said that with a few players, let the puck come to him. Don't chase the puck. Don't chase to win the puck. Be where the puck goes.
Yeah, he does get caught, especially in the defensive zone. He does.
Yeah, and he sometimes also, I think, pinches. He pinches a little bit too much, or takes a few too many risks and pinches, and can get caught off ice, and suddenly there's an odd man rush, and that is something that needs to kind of be developed a little bit.
So Sam said Etienne Morin, but I haven't watched him, so I have no personal opinion on him. Do you know anything about Etienne Morin?
Not that much. However, I am actually willing to give this to Sam just because of how I think Sam, like, again, Sam has such a good knowledge on these type of players. And from what I've seen, like, the one thing I think I've seen from him is that he has that, again, playmaking defenseman with some good offensive tool where it's a very similar player, in my opinion, where the tools are there. Offensively, really great, but needs to maybe make the smarter decisions with the puck, especially defensively. Like, just instead of making the pinch, look at the play develop, and then make your decision rather than what he sometimes can do.
Yeah. And so, to wrap it all up, we have the Minnesota Wild closing out round 2, which obviously is how we close out the mock. We only do a 2-round mock. Because this has gone for a little over 3 hours now. If we did any more than 2 rounds, this would be a little crazy. But with the final pick, who's Minnesota taking?
I will say before this one, this here is going to be a reach. And I don't necessarily know if this is a great pick by Minnesota, or not a great pick, a Minnesota type pick. Because we talked about how Minnesota would go for high-end skill. Had, for instance, Timur Vukohanov been there, I would have taken him because that would have been an obvious one for Minnesota to take. However, given what's left, the highest player on the board is someone you told me about when we started making the list of Last Word on Sport, and I've watched him a fair bit since then, and I love everything about him. So I'm going to take Ryan Fine from the U.S.
Actually, I love that.
Program.
I love that.
Because he is such a terrier. Like, that's the best description I have of him. He's so tenacious. He plays much bigger than he is. his stick works great. He will try and get the puck for it. I think the question is his skill, is his ceiling that great? Not necessarily, but I think he will make a roster in a similar way. I think like a Zach Hyman did on the Leafs, something like that, where it's like that, not the biggest guy, but he will outwork you every single shift. He will outwork you, no matter who it is you place. He will find a way to outwork you. He just knocks the puck off you. He's used the stick extremely well, like to win pucks in the forecheck. I guess so many like games I've watched with the national team development program where he just created so many chances by basically just getting the stick in a way, even if the puck was being lifted or sauced into the air. He got his stick on it, quickly got the puck under control, and sent a pass in front.
Yeah.
He does that so much, and he creates so much chaos. There is definitely question marks about whether this is his ceiling, and his release is not great. It's really, I think it comes off quite slow. I think at times his size kind of works against him, despite his best effort. He is small and gets thrown off the puck. So there is question marks, but he just reminds me of a player that would play a third or fourth line extremely well and maybe eventually be the perfect complement to a top line player, but just because he wins pucks.
Yeah, no, when I look at Ryan Fine, I think the biggest thing obviously is his size. Not just the fact that he's small, but also because of the style he plays. He's just a ball of energy flying around the ice, and there are obviously cases of success at the NHL level with guys like Connor Garland, and again, Zach Hyman, like you mentioned. So it's not like a small player can't pull off this style, but he's slimmer than those guys, and he's not as physically able as those guys, which is my biggest concern. Like, he doesn't have that killer instinct where he'll go in and hit you hard. It's more he'll go in and use his stick to separate you from the puck rather than play the body, which is good, and don't get me wrong, but at the NHL level, defensemen are way too good for you to get their stick. You're better off playing the body. I think that's the biggest concern with Ryan Fine in terms of his style and causing chaos. And he also needs to reel it in a little bit more with that chaos in terms of he's always moving at 100 miles an hour 100% of the time, where sometimes he needs to settle down and go over his options a little bit more. I think he plays with a bit too much chaos. But man, is he just so exciting to watch. Like, if he makes a good play, he makes a good play. Like, he can be crazy sometimes.
He is like a kid that's been like basically in the dressing room just fed energy drinks right before he hits ice and just have so much pent up energy. Like, he never looks tired as well. He never looks tired in the shift. Afterwards, he's like, he looks like he would play 20 minutes a period and be fine. Like,
yeah,
I really, really like him, and I think I have a love for players who just plays a game where it's 100% all the time, and I think it probably shows with this reach.
Yeah,
I'll admit it's a reach. I think you can get him in the third round.
Yeah,
for Minnesota. However, because of the way we have structured this, I wanted to give him his dues, and on Minnesota,
get his name out there.
Yeah, get his name out there, and also on Minnesota's been good at this recently. Mason Shaw has been like one of those players that just plays the right way, and came into the league and played perfectly on that fourth line until he unfortunately got injured right before the playoff. You see it with Nico Sturm when he was in Minnesota, played really, really well, and that whole energy bundle who just made a ruckus every single time. There is concerns about whether he can translate to the NHL, but if he does, he's gonna be so much fun, and I would hate to play against him.
Oh yeah,
because he would be a player that you would just not look forward to play, because you knew you would have to make decisions right then, because else you made a mistake, else he would get the puck. So,
like, there's players like that, like, again, Garland, Marchand's another one. He doesn't play quite like that. He's more annoying in a sense that he's not a pest so much, but he's more like, a mosquito?
He doesn't play dirty.
Like a fly?
He doesn't really play dirty, but
he's not like physical. He's not a guy that's going to hit you. He's not going to hit you hard, but he just is a thorn to the side of defenders, because even if he's not hitting them or physically like punishing them in any way where they're going to be scared to go to the corners to grab it or have to keep like one eye looking back over their shoulder to make sure he's not coming, but more in a sense that he's going to be there and you're going to have to immediately go into protecting the puck and making a quick pass, because otherwise he's going to take it away from you. But before we continue rambling on about Ryan Fine, I just want to say a big shout out to you, Fred, for being here this whole time. 3 hours, 3 long hours as well.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, I love having you on. So I do want to shout you out. I also want to shout out Mitchell Brown. He writes for Elite Prospects. I've mentioned it a few times now, but he wrote a piece on Zach Benson. And there's also a video review of Zach Benson's game. He did a phenomenal job with those 2 projects. And the rest of his work is also phenomenal. So huge shout out to Mitchell Brown. Check him out on Twitter. Again, he writes for Elite Prospects. So some of his work you might need a paid subscription for. Shout out to Sam Tierpak. This is the first time. This is my 5th year doing a mock draft. I can't remember now. I think it's 4. And Sam was not here for the first time. So kind of sad. Not able to be on the call. But again, huge shout out to him. He was obviously a massive help. And one of the biggest reasons why I got into scouting was Sam. So again, huge shout out to him and his support and all the stuff that he does for not just me, but these videos and live streams as well, and for the people reading and watching at home. Again, shout out to all the other guys that were here. All of them do a lot of work. And on my Twitter, at Pereira_report, PEREIRA_report, they're all probably going to quote retweet my tweet about the draft coming to an end with their picks. Check all of those guys out. They do an incredible job. You as well, Fred, of course, covering the Wild. So yeah, just a massive shout out to all you guys and you, Fred, for staying on the whole time. You do an excellent job with Last Word, where I write as well. And of course, Ben writes as well. So again, huge shout out to all the readers and writers. And I will do this in written form. Hopefully the end of this week it'll be out. I'll be working on it. I am on vacation though, so no promises it'll be done this week. But yeah, I mean, I'm aiming for it to be done. It'll be a big piece, so I'll have to try to slim it down. But again, huge shout out to all of you who watched, and of course to those who participated. It's a huge help, and I love doing it. So thank you guys.
Thank you for hosting as well, and thank you guys for listening. Thank you to all who's gonna read it, and yeah, it was and for all who participated. It's always fun to be surrounded by people who has so much knowledge on different players and sees hockey the way, and it is a kind of, for me who is so used to just watching hockey in Denmark, to have the chance to actually talk and kind of deliberate about prospects from all over the world is always really, really fascinating. Yeah,
especially with Sam, who's from Slovakia. It just brings so much interesting insight, because you and Sam watch the European game and you're so used to the style, and so it brings interesting perspective to those of us who haven't watched that game, to really understand it better. Like Molgaard, I mean, watching him, he's great, but you made me appreciate his game more because of your understanding of the European game and your understanding of how he plays. So it's always a huge help getting to talk with all of these guys. Just makes me a better scout at the end of the day as well. So I do appreciate, again, all of those that participated and will participate in future ones and have participated in the past. It's awesome. It really is. It's a lot of fun. So, all right, I'm going to wrap up the live stream and hope you have a great rest of your day, Fred. I know it's late. It's late for you. I don't know what time it is, but
we just passed midnight here. So.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, yeah, I gotta let you go so you can go to sleep. But thanks again for coming on and giving me your time, especially this late. So have a good night.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yep.
Bye, everyone.